Nesse domingo,
No.
esse não.
No.
All right, we can get started whenever the two of you are ready.
Okay,
Would you like me?
take her away, Will.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. If this is your first time joining us virtually for one of our committee meetings, or maybe the first time in a long time, we'll give you a few pre-meeting rules of the road so you know what to expect. So first and foremost, you'll notice that currently you are muted and you are going to stay muted and unable to unmute yourself through the duration of the meeting. As the committee goes through their agenda, as Chuck and Craig go through their agenda, they'll call on presenters who will make presentations, and those people will be unmuted at those times. As we go through the agenda, following each presentation and each agenda item, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button. That's not the wave or the thumbs up, as those will disappear. And only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. Now, if you're calling in from the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute whenever you're called on. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. The chat is available for technical support to help with the Zoom software and only to help with Zoom software problems. It is not to make comments or to ask questions of the co-chairs or presenters. They will never see those chats. But if you're having problems, you can chat me for support. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participant section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, the last thing, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get attention. Chat me if you're having problems. With that, I'll hand it back over to Chuck and Craig.
Okay. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. This is the welcome everyone to the December meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair of the committee, and Craig Lader, my other co-chair. And we're going to start off with the first public hearing for a revocable consent at 9 East 75th Street, application to DOT for revocable consent to construct, maintain, and use a fenced-in area with in-ground planters and area drains. Is there someone here to make a presentation on behalf of this application?
Anybody who's going to make the presentation for this, if you don't mind, just use the raise hand feature, put your hand up, and we'll unmute you.
Nobody here yet? Looks like I don't.
Great question. See any hands up or chats?
I'm not seeing anybody on here. All right, well, why don't we, at this point, we'll pass that and come back to it and see.
Let me just really quickly see
who. Stephen Wang.
Oh, Stephen, there you go.
So, are you making a presentation?
Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. I was looking for my hand.
This is good advice for everybody in the meeting. Listen to me. Number one, that's always the best advice. Number two, reactions icon on your screen, on your device. That's where you're going to find the raise hand button.
Okay, thank you. So I actually thought the DOT was presenting this, and we've spent the last year or so working with them to get to this point. But let me, do you have visibility of the documents?
They are on our website.
I have, if we need to share screen, I can bring it up, Stephen, if somebody can.
Okay.
Why don't you put it on the screen? Because usually we do look at
Okay.
stuff, so we
Shakar.
everything.
Okay. Shakar,
Yeah.
can you put it up on the screen?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Apologize for the technical difficulties, but this is actually our first committee meeting with this DOT submission.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand thing still, but thanks. Okay, can you guys see that on the screen?
Yes, you could make it a little bigger maybe, but it's
Why don't you zero in on the plan, maybe, Shakar, and I can walk them through.
that's a little better, right? Okay.
Yeah, this cover page, when we get to the other pages, there'll be more information. This is kind of a summary of the.
Okay. Let me go first, Shakar.
Yeah.
Walk them through. So there's 3 areaways.
If you could just introduce yourselves, please, first. That would be
Oh,
very helpful.
I apologize. My name is Stephen Wang. I am both the architect of record and the applicant for this project.
And I'm Shakar, work in Stephen Wang's office. Jackson is also on the. If somebody doesn't mind unmuting Jackson, just in case he has something to weigh in, that would also be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 3 areaways, 9, 11, and 13, East 75th Street. And I'm going to work backwards from number 13. Number 13 is an existing areaway, and it's a Queen Anne building. By the way, this was a presentation to Community Board 8 as holistic for the entire project some time ago, and was favorably accepted. We do have DOB and LPC approvals, so this is the final part of the puzzle, which is DOT for the areaways. So number 13 is an existing areaway. Present. Number 11 did not have a areaway, but at some point in history it did, because these were sister buildings, all Queen Anne built together. And at some point in past history, number 11, Queen Anne was demolished and the Georgian was put there and extended out further towards the sidewalk, and what was remaining, the areaway, was removed when that was done. Right there. And number 9, and also the sister houses were demolished and a building was built there, and of no consequence historically, so landmarks allowed that to be removed, and there's a new facade there presently. And that had an areaway defined by planters but no fencing. So what we have come back with is the following. The whole street has fencing, by the way, and this was like a gap in the teeth. So basically from number 9 towards 5th Avenue is very tall fencing. From number 13 towards Madison has a 3-foot high, and these are typical picket wrought iron fences. And we had hoped to continue the tall fence down. Landmarks did not approve that. They approved the 3-foot fencing to be contiguous on these 3 houses. And so it kind of fills in the string going back towards Madison and the townhouses next door. So that is it in essence, but if you have any questions, I can probably more than likely answer them.
You want to talk about how many feet you're coming out, and how, and are there any?
Okay, the feet coming out is aligning with the fences to the left going down to Madison, to 5th Avenue. It's an alignment. Plus DOT has been, terrific in advising us and stringent on enforcing us in terms of clearance from tree pits and so on to exceed 5 feet. And that's probably one of the reasons it's taken literally years to get to this point and get their approval. And the extent is the width of the 3 houses, 2 houses there, and the 3rd house had the fencing. So the new fencing is I believe the middle house is 17, 18 feet, and number 9 was something like 20 feet. And Landmarks wants them to look like separate houses as well, which was another part of their approval process.
And you're planting, and you'll have plantings behind the fences?
We have plantings behind, that's correct.
All right. Well, first, in accordance with our usual procedure, we'll see if there's anyone from the public that wants to comment on this application. And if they are, just as Will said, go to the raised hand reactions button and let us know if you'd like to comment on this.
Yeah, as Chuck said, go to the reactions icon on your device and press the raise hand button if you would like to speak to this application. I'm not seeing
I don't see anyone either, Will.
Yeah.
I see a couple of hands.
They're from our board members.
Yeah, there are our board members. Yeah, we're just looking for the public right now.
Got it. Sorry, thanks.
Okay. Why don't we unmute Michelle first and then later next?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm not at all clear here. You've got 3 houses. They all have areaways at the present time. But what is their property line? In other words, what's the distance between the property line of each of the houses and the proposed fencing?
Okay, I can address that question. Thank you. So in number 13, as I said, that's existing, the areaway. And it is, I'm going to zoom in for my eyes. I apologize. It looks like 6'3" from the property line forward. And that is to 6'3.5". And that aligns with the existing fencing that goes all the way along up to Fifth Avenue.
What I can do is I can just give you.
Yes, I'd like each one of them, please.
Yeah. So
well, 13 is further back. That's from the property line, though. That's what it is. But the building of 13, because it was the original Queen Anne, they were set back about another 5 feet beyond that. Number 11 and number 9 was subsequently, the Queen Anne's were removed and the buildings were built forward all the way up to the property line. That's why the areaways are so much smaller on those 2 than the existing one on number 13. But from the property line, you got that 6'3".
Yeah, this red line that I just drew here is the property line for all 3 properties. It aligns to the front of the plots. And each of these fences at number 9 and 11 are 6'3.5" to the outside of the fence. And then we maintain, that's the, as Stephen mentioned, that's the alignment.
And number 7, number 5, and so they're all the same.
They all align, and then we align, then this one is set back in relation to the existing areaway here.
And that one is 13?
That's number 13, yeah. That already had the deeper
House
area.
number.
Queen Anne, yes.
Okay, but the style is a different thing that we were concerned about in landmarks. At this particular committee, we're concerned about what's happening on the street. So because that number 13 Queen Anne building was rebuilt further back and left space between the end of the building and their property line, so there may be another few feet, but then you have built out 6'3" past their property line. Whether or not the building is there, it's past their property line. Is that correct?
No, I'm not being clear. I apologize. The Queen Anne building is existing. It's an original Queen Anne, and they were built back from the property line. That's how they originally built. And there was a group of 6 of them, sister houses, that were all built back. Some point in history, still some time ago, number 9 and number 11 were built forward to the property line, not beyond the property line. Okay, but the areaways that go up and down that street all align. this is just like as I called it, a gap in the teeth, because you've got all the picket fences coming on down, and then number 9 had some planters, but not the picket fence, and then number 11 had nothing when they built it out for that 6'3", and number 13 had their fence. So that's all.
Okay, but the bottom line is, thank you for that. The bottom line is everything that you're proposing is at least 6'3.5" from the building property line.
Correct.
Okay. And so nothing was built on that before that property line. You're asking for that extension now to create a buffer zone between the street and the actual building frontage. And that's larger in number 13 because that was built back to start with, correct?
That is correct, except number 9 had a planting out to that point. So we're putting the fence there.
I understand, but the planting was still on the public property. It was not
Correct.
Okay, that's my issue.
Correct.
Now, if
Correct.
you look at number 13,
Yes.
I see a stairway there. Is that, or
Correct.
am I misreading it?
No, you're correct. The Queen Anne said what they call the English basement, where you go down half a level, and that is original to what was originally built. When the Georgian at number 11 was built, with the new facade brought forward, they filled in that and raised it to the sidewalk level. Otherwise, there was a step down there too. So if you go back in history, it was all out there and it was all stepped down.
Yeah.
But at some point in history, that when they build out the facades, they filled that in, and so you could walk right into the front door. In fact, when you walked into that front door, shortly thereafter, you had to go down steps internally to get to that first floor level, that English basement.
Okay, but number 13
Yes.
has that areaway going down the steps.
Correct.
Was never within the property line of that building?
No, it's outside the property line.
Always, from the time it was built?
Always. They all were. They all were. That's why the fence we just aligned with, because there's still many like that. That was always out forward historically, and number 13 remains. In fact, landmarks won't let us really. We're restoring that facade and areaway completely, so we can't push that back. We can't do anything. Can't touch it.
Okay, because what I'm trying to get at is, so the other 2 buildings that are west towards 5th,
correct,
with which you are aligning these fences,
yeah,
were they part of the original 6 that were built?
correct.
Okay, and there were no alterations made to those, and so at the original time of construction, that areaway, does that have steps going down currently?
Not currently. Originally,
Everything was removed. Okay.
It was removed and filled in at
All
some
of
point
them.
in history when they demolished the Queen Anne. But all the sister houses had all the fences six. I'm going to use them around them, 6 feet out, step down, English basement, and they all kind of match. There were variations. And in fact, look at number 15, that picture. That 13, it's not us, but 13 and 15 are 2 of the remaining sister houses, and they all step down. You can see the style, and they're all pushed back. So they had a very big, for lack of a better word, front yard, right?
So past the steps of number
Yes.
13,
Yep.
how far into the street, because I understand it's already past the property line, how
Yes.
much further past the steps are you coming into the street?
Well, the steps start from the sidewalk on the street. They start beyond the property line.
I understand. How
they're
much further?
They're 6 feet out. It's 6 feet out.
Yes, but you're coming out some more to create the fence, aren't you?
Well, the fence is aligning with all the fences at the other end. There is an alignment difference there of a few inches. But see, if you go to the I don't know, Shakar, if you have a picture of all the fences on the other side.
I can get Google Maps, but yes, that
I can
fence,
see it.
yeah, that fence
Yeah.
exists, and the steps start at the areaway already. So it's already the steps already start 6'3" out from the.
Okay, so the steps
so the
start at that fence.
Thank you.
In other words,
Thank
if you open that fence, you immediately go down the stairs.
Yes,
Oh,
correct.
that's correct.
If you look like closely here, you can see the fence actually has an opening in it, and that's where the steps start
And you
down.
go right down. Okay.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
the reason I'm asking is because in general, I and others are not fans of taking the public way for private use. In this case, however, when you have steps already violating, in other words, the main property wall, the building wall already comes into the public way.
Correct.
I don't know how that happened, but whatever, it's there. And now you have to deal with that. And now you're just extending the fence so that the other two buildings, which in fact are not at the property line, or one of them is?
No, they both are they brought forward to the property line.
They both are, okay.
And we're just aligning the fences, but the buildings that extend to the right, to Madison, and to the left, all have the fences, whether tall or low, doesn't matter. They have fences, and they also have stairs going down either to a basement or whatever.
So you're not, if they don't have stairs, we've eliminated talking about 13. I understand what happened there. The other two, if they do or do not have stairs, do or do not?
9 and 11 do not have stairs.
Okay, so you're affording 6 feet of space in the public way to those two buildings, specifically to align the fencing of the one that where the body of where the curtain comes to the property line. And so you're affording those two other buildings 6 feet just to bring the fences into alignment, correct?
I would word it a little differently, if I may. I think it's contextual of the street. It's original to historically what would have been there if the sister houses were there. It's consistent as simple wrought iron picket fences. We've gone through extensive landmarks review and so on to get their approval. So it's really, I think, more to be contextual of the street, and it maintains the clearance from the tree pits. It maintains the curb, the back to fences, and I don't mean to be at all crass about it, but that's kind of fill in the gap in those teeth for that facade.
Yes,
and I'm talking about the facade as a street.
I understand. Those are the reasons that it was done.
As an architect, I'm saying that's why it's presented.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Now you said the height of the fencing doesn't matter. The
Well,
recommendation
it does, but I'm
is
just saying
3
for that
feet,
argument.
and how high is the fence on the other end?
Well, they're high on the other end. Maybe Chicago, you can look that up. But we weren't allowed. We wanted to match that. We weren't allowed.
Yeah,
8 feet. 8 feet.
feet.
But our fencing that we're applying for is 3 feet to match the low fencing that sails on down towards Madison Avenue.
Now, do you have an actual graphic of what the fence looks like? And also, can you address what you're going to put on the pavement in the areaway?
Yes.
Sure. Yes.
We have bluestone I'll just zoom in on the plan. Give me a second. So we have it's an iron fence on a bluestone curb, crushed stone ground cover, and then bluestone pavers for the part that you walk on.
You don't have any visuals of that?
We have elevations, yes, of the fence, and close-up details that we've provided the DOB. So let's just pick it.
Maybe show the elevation, Shakar, that's top right now. Yeah.
All right. Yep. There we go.
Because it shows it as red, so you can see the extent. You will see the fencing on the right in black, the picket metal wrought iron fence, and ours will be black and not red. That's just to delineate the extent. So it's a continuation of a wrought iron picket black painted fence at the same height.
And the distance between the fence and how much passing? What's the pedestrian way? How wide is it?
Oh, that's existing from all the fences. Shakar, maybe you got.
Pedestrian is 8 feet, 8.5.
And does that include where the tree pits are? It gets to 7.1. Is that what I'm looking at?
That's 7'1", but
I see it.
DOT is pretty stringent. There's a code on that. It can't be less than 5 feet in Manhattan.
Yeah, so I know the 7'1" that you're looking at is to the center of the tree pit.
The clearance has to be no less than 5 feet.
Yeah, and the clearance on these two tree pits are 5'2¼ and 5'5". So we made it.
Are the new tree pits, are they up to code? You know, they've extended them to 5 or 6 feet, whatever.
Yeah, I know they have, but we had to keep the existing. So these are the existing.
And they're okay with them to be existing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Alita Camp, I believe, is next. Can you unmute Alita?
Chuck, I think, oh, there was someone from the public. Well, he's not there now. I oppose this. I normally agree with Michelle, but I don't here because there's not enough distance on the sidewalk, even though DOT says it's okay. And I don't believe that you can say it conforms to the historic fencing, but the buildings do not conform to the historic facades because they have come out to the property line when the original buildings were set back as number 13 is. So I don't think you could have it both ways. I find it objectionable when there is public space that is being taken for private use, which in this case is to create something that's private to the building itself. I don't believe that it's necessary because these three buildings have distinct architectural styles. So you don't need to have a uniform fence in front of it, except to the extent that you want one, but I don't think it's necessary. I walk down these streets between 3rd and 5th fairly often, or between 2nd and 3rd, and see plenty of spaces where the fences are not contiguous, where the style is not uniform, where there are, as you put it, and I agree with you, gaps in the teeth, but it doesn't harm the look of the block. It doesn't harm the sense of the block, and not having fencing in this instance protects the pedestrians. I don't know why you're keeping the tree pits. They're the smaller ones. They don't benefit the trees, but a little over 5 feet just does not seem enough on a park block where there is traffic from people going back and forth, pedestrian traffic to the park, from the park. I think people need the space. The city is becoming more and more and more congested. And I just don't think it's fair to the public to take public space on the sidewalks for private use. And that's exactly what this is. And aesthetically, I don't think it's necessary. Again, and I'm sorry to be repetitive because the buildings are distinct architecturally. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, but that's my sense and I cannot approve this.
No, I know. I just like to make a comment in general about revocable consents, and it's one that I've been concerned, frankly, about some of the positions taken on revocable consents, and I'm going to talk generally because there's a clear process, under DOT regulations that allow for revocable consents, and under strict supervision, and it seems to me it's a decision that's been made by the city to say that something like this, if it meets certain requirements, are appropriate and can go forward. And I think that obviously the committee and the board can do whatever it wants, but in the past we have never taken a strict position that we're against this because we believe it's encroaching on the public right to use the sidewalks. That's all I'll say about that. Rita?
I think the presentation was excellent. We certainly know what you're doing and we know how you're doing it, whether we agree with this at this period, at this time. I would like to make a motion that we approve the
Well, I guess technically you're
Jill
not,
is saying no.
no,
no.
though Michelle's saying you speak about it, you should, why, why don't you say, I'd like to make a,
Because I said something before that I should make a
right.
motion.
Yeah,
I've got it.
but we could
I'm
have Judy Schneider, I'll call on Judy Schneider. Judy? Can we unmute Judy? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, it takes me a minute to unmute.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to follow up on Rita to approve this presentation.
Okay, is there a second? See if there's a second there.
Rita.
Rita is seconding that, okay. Is there further discussion? If Alita would like to say something, please unmute Alita.
Thank you. I think the DOT is behind the times, and just because the city may allow it doesn't mean that it should be allowed. That's all I want to say in response to what you said. I know that the DOT provides for it, but I don't think the DOT is doing an adequate job of protecting the public space as the city becomes more congested, and that's why I oppose them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. I don't see any further discussion. Can we vote on this? Anyone object to?
Judy raised her hand again. Maybe to call a
question.
question.
Oh, Judy, go ahead.
Call the question.
Okay, is there a second for that? Somebody, yes, yeah. Any objections? Okay, why don't we vote on this? And Craig, do you want to take attendance so we know who we have here?
Yes. So we have myself, Chuck, Abraham, Alita, John, Judy, Juno. I should say John McClemens, since we have two Johns on the board. Lori, Michelle, Paul, Rita, Sharon, Stephanie, Valerie.
Did you get Juno?
Yes, I did. I thought I did.
I didn't, maybe I just didn't. Is there anyone who we didn't get? Okay, so if you're in favor, you don't have to do anything, but all those who are opposed or want to abstain or have other reasons for not voting yes, raise their hand. So let's see, I see Valerie. And then you go.
I'm a no.
Okay. Alita Camp.
No.
Okay. Michelle.
Abstain.
Abstain. Juno.
No.
Okay. Paul. I couldn't hear you. Oh, you didn't have to unmute, Paul. Go ahead.
No.
No. Okay. Anyone else? We always see Abraham.
Did you get Stephanie?
Abraham, did you have your hand up?
I did. I had my hand up. I'm going to abstain as well.
Okay, and then Stephanie. Sorry, Stephanie. Go ahead.
No.
Stephanie. Okay. Can we?
Which means that we have 7 yeses, 5 noes, 2 abstentions. So essentially, it is an even vote.
Okay, I guess we have no position. We'll have to take it to the full board since we don't have a majority in the affirmative, so we can't say we have a resolution here at this point. So, Mr. Wang, we're going to have our full board meeting on the 13th, a week from today, and this will come up, but we won't have a resolution, and there'll be discussion at that time. And you're not allowed to make a presentation, but you can speak in the public session. You get a couple of minutes at the beginning of the meeting to speak in the public session. So that's where
Okay.
So thanks for your presentation. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay. Item number 2 is discussion of intro 1151-2023 in relation to the installation of solar-powered crosswalks. Craig, did you have anything you wanted to say on this first, or do we have anyone who wants to make a presentation?
Yes, if you don't mind, I just want to do a little bit of an introduction to both this and the third item as well, which are both pedestrian safety oriented items. Will, if it's okay, I'd like to just share my screen for a moment, please.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead now.
Let's see if this works. Sometimes this can be a little finicky. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
There we go.
All right, great. So this may look familiar to some of you. For those of you who are regular attendees of this committee, you may recall that a few months ago I did a presentation highlighting some of the Crash Mapper data, Crash Mapper being a visualization of open source data coming from the New York Police Department regarding all crashes that take place all across the city. And the beauty of that is it is a very user-friendly interface and allows you to sort things by community district. So this is just a map here displaying all of the crashes that have taken place in 2023 year to date. And by year to date, I didn't look at the day, but it's probably through November 30th and may actually include a couple of days in December because it's usually just a few days behind. And what I'd like to just call out, given that the next two items are regarding intersection safety, is you can see that most of the activity, most of the crashes that are occurring are happening at intersections. It's a little harder to tell on the north-south avenues, but if you look on the mid blocks, on the east-west mid blocks, there are not very many dots representing crashes. You can see here on 60th between 2nd and 3rd, there's some activity, and there are some that are sporadic here or there. But largely, most of our crashes are taking place at intersections, and not surprisingly, that's in all likelihood where injuries are occurring as well. So down here we just have a little overall summary of the number of fatalities and injuries that have occurred in our district so far this year, and this is based off of 421 crashes. But I want to just provide a little more context because what makes this a little misleading, if you will, is the fact that it includes the FDR drive. So the FDR drive, obviously, there aren't going to be any injuries regarding motorists. I mean, regarding pedestrians or cyclists, it's all going to be motorist injuries. And I just am trying to highlight what the injuries and what the rates are in regards to pedestrians and cyclists on our streets, which relate to the next two topics. I know this is small and I apologize for that, but I just want to try to fit everything in here. But this is essentially all the crash data year to date on each of the cross streets in our district from 59th to 96th streets. And you can see here the top line numbers are 213 crashes, and of those crashes, there were 112 people in vehicles that were injured, 75 pedestrians, and 58 cyclists. So that's a total of 245 people total that were injured, and one fatality, one pedestrian killed, and that was linked to a cross street. Now, if you look at the avenues, the data, I tried to separate out the FDR drive for the reasons that I just stated, because I think those are skewing the breakdown, if you will. So if you take out the FDR drive, which, as I discussed at the prior meeting, is the most problematic roadway that we have in our district by far, we have 148 crashes that were considered to be on the avenues itself, 82 motorists injured, 51 pedestrians, 38 cyclists. That's a total of 171 injuries. And there were, sorry, I can't see my screen fully, so I don't know. Okay, yeah, motorists, pedestrians, cyclists. And then persons killed, there were two people killed, both pedestrians, and yeah, both pedestrians in on the avenues. So in total, that was, excluding the FDR drive, 361 crashes with 194 motorist injuries, 126 pedestrian injuries, 96 cyclist injuries, with three fatalities, one motorist, and two pedestrians. I may have misspoken before that one on the cross streets was was a motorist, not a pedestrian killed. So that's just setting the context in terms of the fact that we have some clear issues in regards to pedestrian safety taking place here. And as we often will hear about in local media, over the past few months, especially, there is a rash of incidents that resulted in pedestrian injuries. So this is why it seemed like it was a opportune time to have this discussion and to try to talk to a couple of potential approaches to trying to deal with some of the injuries that, I mean, some of the statistics that we're seeing here. So with that, I guess we can lead into this discussion. And I know that we had invited someone from Councilmember Julie Menon's office, and I don't know if who that would be, but hopefully someone is here to speak to the proposed legislation that she had put forward.
Yes, that would be me. I'm Brian Jordan, Legislative and Budget Director and Scheduler. I do know that there are 3 people with their hands up. Are we going to go to them first?
Why don't you talk first, Brendan?
Okay, sounds good. I'll be as brief as I can, given the people are interested in this very conversation on topic. So I myself am Brandon Jordan. I use he, him pronouns. I would like to talk about this bill, Introduction 1151. And I want to thank everyone, particularly the co-chairs, for putting it on the agenda. This legislation will require the Department of Transportation to install 500 solar-powered crosswalks over the next 5 years. So that would be 100 each year. In addition, the Department of Transportation would conduct a study on the use of these solar-powered devices after it's all been installed. So basically, the purpose of this legislation is what's being done in other municipalities. From San Francisco to New Haven, Connecticut, there are a variety of cities that use solar-powered crosswalks, and they're always used in terms of pedestrian safety. So I've seen in statistics, it's a major issue, not only in the Upper East Side, but all across the city. We think the legislation itself fits into the city's vision of Vision Zero. So what we analyzed in 2022, based on the city stats, is that there were over 50,000 traffic injuries and there are 255 traffic fatalities. And when we looked into the data even more, being struck by a vehicle was the second leading cause of injury for children, injury-related death for children under 14, and it was the second leading cause for seniors as well. This is a very serious issue. It's very, very serious. So in terms of legislation, we're very happy and very excited about it. We currently have 37 co-sponsors. We have bipartisan support. We have the public advocate on board. We're very excited for it. We believe it will be heard sometime next year at the beginning of the session. And I'm happy to answer any questions around this bill, what we want to do with it, because we want to make sure it goes over the line and we're able to implement it in conjunction with the Department of Transportation. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Ben. I don't know if there's anyone, I don't see anyone from the public. I know we have a number of board members who want to ask some questions.
We actually do have one person now from the public.
Liam
Jeffries.
Liam, okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Please, go ahead.
Fantastic. Yeah, so this is a really timely discussion, especially in terms of the fact that it seems like we actually are making progress in at least trying to address it, in that Mayor Adams, of course, had his press conference where he announced the daylighting, or at least the intended daylighting of, I think it was 100, or actually could be 1,000, I forgot the specifics, but anyway, it was a big number. It's definitely something that should be heavily done here. It should be heavily done here. And the big reason is that it's a proven safety feature. We usually like to go to a lot of cities as examples about how to improve pedestrian infrastructure. We actually don't have to go that far to look at this in action. Hoboken has daylight.
Liam, I think you're talking about the next item.
Am I talking about the next item? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we're talking about illuminated crosswalks here.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Okay, never mind. I stopped then. Sorry about that.
We'll get you the next time around. Okay, let's see. We have But we have some other members of the public now who, David Vassar. Can we recognize David Vassar?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I too am primarily here to support daylighting, but I'm really this measure for illuminated crosswalks sounds great, and I think it will contribute to safety. And I'm a member of Transportation Alternatives, Families for Safe Streets. I'm also a veteran cyclist. I've cycled 25 years in New York City and love it. Yeah, the crosswalks. I need to get more information. I mean, the idea of solarizing something like a crosswalk is also hugely interesting, and I think very progressive. But I'm going to stop right now because it's really daylighting that I want to focus on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Hindi Shacker. Go ahead, unmute him.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I'm a long-term resident of CB8. I'm a senior citizen cyclist, a senior citizen pedestrian, and I came to talk about daylighting, but I think the best use of my time is to talk simultaneously about solar-powered crosswalks and daylighting. As Craig pointed out, we are having an epidemic of crashes and an epidemic of totally unnecessary deaths. The way out of this epidemic is safety enhanced street design. And therefore, I am delighted that having come to say I wanted safety enhanced daylighting, I find that's not the only safety design that's on the table, but we also have a way of making the crosswalk safer. It's the crosswalk and the turning zones where most of the crashes occur. And if you are a senior citizen cyclist, that's where most of your fear comes. I would be so happy to hear that this committee has approved the solar crosswalk and the daylighting so that we can have a safer New York. And I look forward to people on this committee making a safer set of streets for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Okay,
If you don't mind my interruption, I did actually find a couple of images of this so that everybody has
good.
a little bit better of an understanding of what this actually looks like. I know it's I didn't actually know what this was, and I feel like I usually do know what these things are. So these are some images of what the proposal is supposed to look like, right? Is this Brandon?
Correct. That is what it would look like. And I have some images myself, but that exactly is what it would look like. And we've looked into studies of how it works, and it actually does. It improves pedestrian safety. No longer people have to run at night because from our analysis of the data, a good number of injuries happen at night. And so illuminated crosswalks can definitely help people cross safer and without the concern that they'll get hit or even worse than that.
Okay, thank you. All right, next, I think there, let's see, one.
Daniel.
Sutton, I believe, one had his hand.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, I'm here with Ye also. I live in CB2 in Greenwich Village, but I came to this meeting because I think it's very interesting to learn about illuminated sidewalks and crosswalks. And it's a good example of using technology to save people's lives. So if it can do that, then it's only a good thing. And I think that we should do it everywhere. So that's my input.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
See Oliver Brukoff. Can we unmute Oliver Brukoff? There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm generally also in favor of anything that makes our public domain safer for pedestrians as well as cyclists. My one concern with the plethora of things we can do is we can only spend our money once. And there's a concern that if you go overboard, we spend it on the wrong things. My question would be on how effective illuminated crosswalks will be in an area in our community board area where we have a lot of street lighting on every intersection. The pictures shown here show roads outside the immediate area in suburban areas where there isn't much street lighting, where this makes a lot of difference. I wonder whether the investment is sensible in an area like the Upper East Side, where there's a lot of street light already in place.
Brandon, do you want to comment on that?
Certainly. I would say it is definitely worth the investment. I'm going to give you a couple of reasons as to why. Number one, the city itself has a Vision Zero plan. And we know that there's been an increase, for example, in the number of people on bicycles going into accidents and injuries. So clearly something has to be done. And we proposed this legislation, which is done in other municipalities across the country. And from our analysis, it does work. It does help them out. Because from the council member's point of view, this is for the betterment of New York City. And that honestly is why we have the majority of support, a supermajority really, of council members. And we're very confident in getting over the line. And from our analysis, and we're continuing doing this, it would not be so expensive to implement. Honestly, the most important thing, and I think everyone here can agree with it, is we want less accidents. We want less people to get hit. We don't want more incidences like seeing the data provided earlier. We want to see that. And we're happy to push this forward. The council member has passed 13 bills this session, and we're confident to get more bills passed next session. And we've seen this work across the country. And we think it's time for New York City to do this right now because it works. We have a number of people in support, both in the city council and outside of it. And yeah, we're very confident behind the proposal.
Good. I don't see any members of the, thank you. I don't see any other members of the public right now. And before we go to the board, do you see any, Will?
Nope.
Let's go to Alita Camp. Alita?
Thank you, Chuck. And I know Julie has a lot of good legislation that she's passed. I had raised my hand originally because I had a question, which is there data as to the cause of the accidents? Police file reports. I don't know if they ticket people or if there are causes, but lack of visibility versus a distraction versus swerving to get out of the way versus a truck that is double parked and too close to an intersection. Those are all different reasons. And I'm not opposed to it, but the lighting or any other proposal might have limited effect when the cause is not related to a lack of light. So that's one question. My second question is, I think Oliver does make an interesting point, which is in looking at the data around the country, is there a differential between well-lit intersections and other areas that may not be so lit, so that spending the money or putting these things in when there are lights does not actually improve things as opposed to other streets where the light might not be as bright or there might be no light at all. And third of all, I find it really difficult to separate out the idea. And again, I support anything to assist pedestrian or enhance pedestrian safety, but I find it hard to separate out looking at intersections when there, at the same time that there are bikes going up and down, bike lanes in the wrong direction, mopeds in the bike lanes, bikes going the wrong direction up the street without being in a bike lane. And there's no sense, there's no interest in enforcing any of that. So how much do pedestrian lives really matter when there is a frequent and consistent outcry for enforcement of simple traffic laws that would help ensure pedestrian safety when faced with an oncoming bike, especially as bike use, moped use, cargo bike use proliferates and pedestrians are really just caught in the middle. That's it. Thank you.
I think Craig may want to comment on this, and maybe Brandon, but as I remember looking at some of the studies, they said most of these accidents happen in intersections where people are injured. But why don't you, Craig, you want to comment on that? You've been looking at it closely.
Yes, the crash mapper data doesn't necessarily distinguish between it. You could just do your best to zoom in on the map and to see where they are. But typically, yes, that is where the most points of conflict are, because that is where the majority of people are crossing. And that's not to say that there aren't people who are crossing against the light at times or mid-block, or that there aren't other things that are taking place. But I think at the end of the day, this discussion is really about things that we can do to enhance safety. And yes, we may be able to pick at some of the other contributors, if you will, to what may cause people to be unsafe. But here we're, I think, trying to focus on things that are actionable, that we know are contributing to some of the crashes that are taking place and the injuries that occur to people who are crossing streets.
Because I thought I had read in an article in the paper that the intersections were where most of this happened.
Yeah, it's a pretty well understood fact. I don't know that I have anything offhand that I could point to, but
I'm not. Sorry, Craig. I'm not arguing that they don't occur in intersection. I've seen where there have been accidents in intersections, and that was even before they put that little bump out in the street. My only question is whether the cause of the accidents in the intersection, if they know what has led to those accidents, because there are lots of different potential reasons. And again, lighting intersections probably makes a difference, but if a driver is distracted and looking at texts, or adjusting a station on Spotify, will the lighting make a difference? And that's all I'm asking, is how much data is available for the cause in the intersections, which is, again, not to say that this is not a good plan, but it may need to be supplemented by other things to help, again, ensure pedestrian and bike safety, bicyclist safety.
And I'll just comment on this crash mapper data, which the majority of the crashes that that are in the database, the contributing factors are unspecified. And then there are many different categories which also play a role. Yes, driver inattention, distraction is a leading cause. Failure to yield the right of way, following too closely, unspaced speeds, traffic controls disregarded, pedestrian, bicyclist error or confusion. But there isn't anything specific to, I guess, what may be happening within the right of way that may also be contributing to it. So I would have to assume that the unspecified category probably relates to some extent those accidents that are caused by just a driver not noticing a pedestrian or a cyclist in a crosswalk. For whatever reason that may be.
Add to that, Brandon? You want to?
Yeah. I can briefly address this. So I also want to add toward this discussion that back in February, the council member had written a letter around this very topic to Department of Transportation and Commissioner Yannis Rodriguez. This actually works. So a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of these situations, what we really need to focus on is that these solar power crosswalks are visual. So they capture the attention of the driver immediately. And so you see in all different types of cities across the country, Indianapolis, Orlando, Tampa Bay, a lot of times what happens is that it works for the benefit of pedestrians, so that there's an additional visual aid that can at least help them out. It's similar to the existing accessible pedestrian signals that are installed across the city. So we think, honestly, this is a good solution, another good solution, another critical step toward pedestrian safety. because we don't want to sit on our hands here. What we want to provide is solutions, given the number of injuries and fatalities across the city.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple of other people in the public here. Dylan Geronimo Kennedy, can we unmute Dylan?
Yep, I just wanted to pop in to add 2 additional points of context. One, Crash Mapper does let you see intersections. That's one of the boundary filters available. However, at least I have not figured out, I don't think you can have both a CB8 and an intersection filter. It's kind of one or the other. So there is a little bit of context there. And then 2, I want to share that I was driving in White Plains, and it was not exactly like this, but it was a similar idea. Pedestrian walks across and that activates a light. And I have my headlights on. I already have some illumination on the crosswalk. However, the lights coming on and coming towards me were much more effective as a way of reminding me, oh, hey, there's actually someone in this person, unlike most times where you drive through this. Or, it was really more about calling attention to it than just illuminating it. So when we're talking about is the issue visibility or distracted drivers, I do want to just share the firsthand experience that I was driving in a place that had something like this. And it absolutely clued me in that there was something special going on and caused me to be more careful, caused me to be more safe. So I just wanted to share that additional context for the efficacy of this. Thanks.
I need to thank you, Dylan, for those comments. As someone who works in White Plains and walks by that intersection or that crosswalk every day, I do appreciate it. White Plains is a pedestrian nightmare that makes you feel safe walking in New York because they have double turn lanes that make it really hard for pedestrians. So I do want to just
I thought you were in charge of making things better there.
Unfortunately, I work for the county, and most roadways are locally controlled.
I couldn't resist.
That's the city of White Plains, and it's my number one issue over there.
Okay, just a little levity and serious subject here. Okay, let's go to the board. I see we have Oliver Brukoff, who already spoke, but I want to get some of the board members, because we have a number of board members here. And Sharon Marshall. Can we unmute Sharon? Good.
Can
Sharon.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Chuck. It was indeed a really good joke. And I want to say that I'm really, really excited about what Julie Menon is doing with respect to illuminating intersections. And to Oliver, I want to add some context, if you will, to this conversation and to your question. And thank you so much for that question. I am out often late at night attending community meetings. I have to tell you, Oliver, I do not think that you can over illuminate an intersection. I want to tell you that I think that we're not anywhere near that point. And I very much support illuminating or adding additional illumination to intersections overall. I think that vastly increases pedestrian safety. I think that that's something that we can do. And of course, there are other things that we can do, but this is what we have in front of us at the moment. So I'm really excited for this idea of illuminating crosswalks, and also for the next issue after this one that's on the agenda, daylighting of crosswalks, not to be confused, but absolutely, I support both. And I just want to really make clear that as someone who does walk at night, and sometimes close to 10 o'clock, it's extremely important that we have our intersections in all of New York City much more illuminated than they are right now. So this is a step in the right direction that I plan to support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, Michelle? Michelle?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to welcome Liam, because on this meeting, he sees what a nice, quiet, back and forth reasoned conversation is. Our group was not afforded that by he and members of his group at one of our meetings. Sorry, I had to make that statement. Let me just ask a couple of questions here, because we saw the visual, but the visual is a graphic. And I have concerns about the ambient light in residential areas. And how bright is this? How many lumens? I'm looking at the actual structures that are on the street. So you've got the courtesy lamp, you've got a bollard sensor activation. So does that mean that this only illuminates when a pedestrian is about to cross?
Correct. It would function similarly to an accessible pedestrian signal.
Only when the pedestrian crosses, so it's not constantly on.
Okay, that was a question. And I see like the push button activation. So if this automatically goes on, is the push button activation, is that a backup or what is that exactly?
It could be a push button. It also could be a weight sensor. It really would depend in conjunction with the Department of Transportation.
So you have both though. You have the bollard sensor and the push button.
Correct.
Right?
It would depending on how DOT would like to approach this very topic and how it would like to implement it.
Oh, so it's a choice, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so the legislation as well includes a study component. So they look into it and see how it's working. So and what are the results of the plan. But in the letter, to the DOT commissioner, we said that they flash intermediate lights and illuminate these crosswalks when activated by a weight sensor, or you just push a button. It's either or.
So I think if you just push a button, you've eliminated the structures that are on the sidewalk. Is that correct? Which could be in blocking the pedestrian way. But if you're saying it's a choice, then there is an alternative. Is that true?
I don't know what structures you're referring to.
The bollard sensor activation.
Yes.
I guess you'll have to look. I mean, when you would have to look about people who may have trouble, whether it's they can't see as well or
can't hear you, Chuck.
Sorry, you may have to account for people who can't see well, and that's if it's automatic, then that's not a problem. But if they have to push a button, that could be an issue. If it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think Brandon said you could have a choice. It could be either the bollard sensor activation or the button. But anyway, that's a question that I would have. Now, the roadway warning lights, are they on all the time?
Is that a question for me, or is that a question?
Well, Brandon, you're the expert.
All right. So the roadway warning lights, they're not on all the time. Just to emphasize again, when you touch in whatever way you do it, whether it's a sensor, whatever, they're warning signs. They're intermediate, so they function for the pedestrian when they're crossing, and so they're not on all the time. They're there to help the pedestrian cross safely and to provide a visual signal for the driver.
Okay, so they're not on. That's my thing. Now, what exactly does the controller do?
The controller's there more as basically as a part of this entire network and the structure. So this is just one example. I just want to emphasize this is just one example of how a solar powered crosswalk would work. It probably would be different in another place like so. It really would depend. But the controller could be very different, such as in this or in another example.
Is that spelled out in the bill, all of the alternatives?
No, it's not spelled out in the bill. So what the bill says is that Department of Transportation would be required to install 500 solar powered traffic control devices over 5 years. And then they, at the same time, they would do a study. It doesn't provide specifics on that. That would be more figured out by DOT and rulemaking.
So how are the sites chosen?
Again, that would be decided within rulemaking. We don't list that within the bill. The bill says that DOT would install 100 per year for 5 years, and they would make the choice within the rulemaking.
Will the community, when a site is chosen, will they come to the community in order to get feedback as to which of the methods the community would prefer? For example, or think good for their community. For example, you have narrower sidewalks, wider sidewalks. Here you're putting things on the sidewalk. You have sunnier areas and shadier areas in terms of being solar powered. Will the community have any screening, or will there be a hearing or a suggestion when the sites are chosen? And the method?
It feels like this is a question for the Department of Transportation. I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but what I can tell you is this. When this bill is heard, and this goes for everyone here as well, you're all welcome to go to the public portion of the hearing and provide your comments and perspectives around the bill. I'm certain DOT would have community input, but again, I don't want to speak for DOT or on their processes, but again, that would be in the rulemaking. Okay. And we just have this bill requiring them to install 100 solar powered crosswalks each year over 5 years.
Michelle, okay. I think Michelle.
Is Colleen on? Does she have some insight here?
Hey, Michelle, it's Colleen. I'm on. So it would be a bit premature for us to lay down the ground rules on this, because for the mere fact that we haven't committed to this yet. I do recall the council member's letter being sent to the commissioner. So I would have to follow up and find out what our position is about this. So in terms of locations, I would imagine, and I don't want to jump the gun and say this, I would imagine that yes, if we identify locations, we will come before the community board, of course. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure, Michelle, that's what we're going to ask that they, and strongly request that they do that. It has to obviously go through, they're going to do a study, they're going to come up with what they think of the intersections that are probably involved in most accidents and stuff like that, to try to and pick them out. And if they're, to the extent they're in in our area and stuff, we want to obviously
yeah. So I would just ask Chuck that if there is a resolution, that everything you're saying would be included in that resolution.
Yes.
Whereas we expect the input, whereas we want more detail, we need, all that.
I was just going to say that, Michelle, should this pass, of course, the resolution would strengthen it as a, with what Chuck just said. If you can put all of those,
put all that wording in there and provisos. Okay, thank you.
I always like resolutions which take everything that's
in. Before we continue, I just want to, on behalf of the committee, apologize to Liam and remind all of our members and public attendees that it is never appropriate to make a comment about another member or a member of the public and say anything and call them out for any reason. We do have a decorum clause in place, and I want to just remind everyone to please respect that and to be respectful of everyone who is in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, let's see. Next is Juno. Can we unmute Juno?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say the same thing as Michelle, so maybe I should lower my hand, but I definitely agree there needs to be some sort of community input, so the DOT doesn't just install them in places where the community doesn't agree.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Next, let me call on our chair-elect, and this is her first meeting since she was elected.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I just want to say,
and so go right ahead.
I found your joke very funny too, and Craig, you took it very well. It was very funny. I have to say that
I was a little confused about what this actually was from the initial presentation. And while everyone's been talking, I looked up this solar pedestrian crossing on the internet, and and it's interesting because the examples that you show in the graphics, it talks about this crossing system helping alerting motorists to approaching a point in the road where pedestrians cross. And where they suggest using it is middle of the block crossings, school zone crossings, jogging and running paths, hiking trails, horse trails, cyclist crossings, and golfers with or without carts. And I noticed in the two examples that they showed on the slides, they're not actual intersection crosses. They're middle of the block crossings, basically alerting you to places where pedestrians may be crossing where you would not expect it. I mean, in the city of New York, we expect pedestrians to be crossing wherever there is a light. So I'm not sure how this would work and what the efficacy would be to be installing it at every crosswalk. Especially, I mean, I want to make the crosswalks as safe as possible. As many of you know, I was actually hit crossing at a crosswalk by a car that was making a left turn. So I'm very familiar with crosswalk crashes myself. But I'm failing to see, I understand, Brandon, that you're saying that this was successful in other places. Where were these placed? What is the efficiency? Putting out 100 of these a year, it looks like there's an infrastructure cost here. Again, taking up the sidewalk with more stuff. And I just want to make sure we would be getting a good bang for the buck. I wouldn't be against doing some kind of pilot program and helping do this. Like, I would think that this might be a great idea in Central Park on the loop to alert, if somebody walks out in the loopway and people can't see it. The other thing I'm missing is, why would this be effective during the day? I mean, again, I'm not sure what you're illuminating. The New York City surface of streets has so many lines and green here, huge crosswalk here, move into the left lane. I don't even understand what the motorist would be looking at in that environment. Again, I'm willing to be educated and keep an open mind, and I definitely want to make the pedestrian crossing experience as safe as possible. But I'm kind of missing out here on what this is really used for. And again, the slides you showed exemplify a middle block crossing, or crossing between two buildings in the middle of looks like a corporate setting. So any response?
Comment, you want to respond to that, Brandon?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to, what you looked up. But what I can tell you is that yes, we did look, the examples there are more of a visual aid. And just to go into the legislation and really talking about it a little in detail, the Department of Transportation would do a study, and they will look at a comparison of how effective they are
I know,
in
but you're
deterring
not,
vehicles.
excuse me, can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Never once in your presentation have you said what this is.
Solar powered crosswalks.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Okay.
Because you can mean that you have underground lighting and the crosswalk is lit, and as you're walking across it, it's got like a Tom Hanks Mr. Big thing where every time you put your foot down, it lights up. So
Okay.
like, what is it?
So let me define it very clearly here, okay? So these are traffic control devices that flash intermediate lights and illuminate crosswalks when they're activated, similar, for example, to accessible pedestrian signals. And the
What is
purpose
that?
of
Let me
these,
stop you right there. What is it
okay,
illuminating? Because it looks like the lights are on either side of the crosswalk in what was shown. It's not
right.
illuminating the crosswalk.
So let me continue.
Okay.
So these devices are to flash bright lights at a driver who's just coming. And it's to warn drivers that there's a pedestrian crossing. So it's done to increase visibility of pedestrians crossing and a visual signal for any distracted drivers so that they would come to a stop. That is what these devices do, and that's what they are.
And how would that be different from a car going up Third Avenue and having a stoplight changing from yellow to red?
Again, I think in this type of scenario, you have to think about the time. You have to think about who's crossing. There are a lot of assumptions here. I would say across the country, from what we've seen, there are cities and they have implemented this. So what we're saying is, why doesn't New York City have this? The Department of Transportation would do a study and they would look at how effective is it? Where is it located? What are the challenges logistically in placing these very solar powered crosswalks? I think all of these questions would be done partially through DOT, but the main purpose of this is to help out the pedestrian. That's like the tenet and the central thing that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I get it. But I'm just saying, if you're in the middle of the summer and absolute daylight, how is the motorist seeing this during the day? Or is this meant for nighttime? I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to understand the efficacy of this during the day.
Right. So during the day, there is light. So usually this will be used at night. I think the examples provided show that, and from what we've seen as well. Again, I think I want to emphasize here, based upon the data, we see a good number of accidents happening at night between 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. That's a significant number of them. And so at that point, you would have to step in and say, wait a minute, all right, there's a lot of people that are getting hurt, they're getting injured, and worse, we have fatalities happening. And so this very solution is to step in and say, as part of the city's Vision Zero plan, we need to illuminate when there are pedestrians crossing. Otherwise, what option do you have? You either stop immediately or you run across the street and hope that the car doesn't hit you. We really can't have that. We need to have another layer there that protects pedestrian. And in this case, these lights, which would flash, signal to the driver, now wait a minute, I got to stop here.
And that is not done by a red light.
Again, I really want to emphasize the central tenet here. You have a distracted driver, right? And so you would need another layer, in this case, a solar-powered crosswalk, to help identify for the driver that they would need to stop. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, Valerie, the evidence seems to show that red lights are not enough of a deterrent. And I think the idea is to something else that would sort of jar the driver out of it, as opposed to the red light, which they know is there. And most of the time, the only thing they're trying to do is beat it, usually.
And if I may also as well, how often do you come into an intersection and you see a car that's all the way parked through the crosswalk and you have to walk out into the street to get around them?
Yes. Rita Popper.
I think that any aid in illumination of the streets is great. However, taking what Alita and Valerie said, is I've been complaining for years that the streets are dark. The streets that we have now are dark. And we're doing everything except putting in more wattage. As long as we can build something, put something in, and then the city has no money. But we have a light at the corner. We can make it brighter. And the other thing is that I was a driver. I have never been frightened as I am crossing the street at night because bicyclists don't have lights. And that's not all bicyclists. It just takes a few bicyclists. And in the winter, when people are wearing dark clothing and the pedestrian crossing is wearing dark clothing, it really makes for a very unsafe situation. And again, we are not, even though the example was mid-block, we have spent, as a teacher, teaching children to only cross at the corner, and everybody should only cross at the corners. But I'm not exactly for this. I think that this is an expensive way to fix what we already have. Give us more illumination of the lights that are already in place. So that's just my thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. I think Leah is next. We'll just take it in order here, Leah. If we can unmute Leah.
Oh, great. Thank you. I have three questions. One, in light of what Rita Popper was just saying, could you give us an idea of how much this does cost per crosswalk, per intersection? However you've got the data. Second, how sturdy are these systems? Are these lights going to be torn up by snowplows? How much maintenance do they require? Are they just all going to be broken in 2 years? And third, could you tell us about the flashing lights? As someone who has had seizures at points in my life, there were a lot of flashing lights and strobe lights on the street, and I can see them causing a seizure in a driver who has never had one before but is taking medication that makes them subject to it and they don't know. So just what are these flashing lights and how flashy are they? Those are the three questions.
I'm going to go in reverse in terms of your questions. In terms of flashing, again, this would be a Department of Transportation question. So they would have to figure out in terms of rulemaking what kind of lights would be used, the exact detail around them. In terms of what I see nationally, that's never been presented as an issue in other municipalities of just flashing seizure-induced flashes that cause seizures. So that would be one. In terms of the second, the maintenance of them, again, that would also be done through rulemaking. I don't think these are going to be installed and then next year they're just broken. That does not seem practical. And it just, from what we've seen researched in the data, we don't see these systems going up 1 year and then they just are faulty for the next 2 or 3. They actually do work and they actually are there for a good while. How long? Again, I would have to look at the exact data of how long they've been, the tenure, etc. And then in terms of the cost, it varies depending on the municipality. So for New York City, of course, we wouldn't really know that. We would get the exact number from the city council's financial division when they're able to calculate the data. But I would say it's too preliminary of a conversation. This bill hasn't even been heard yet. And we would have to negotiate with the Department of Transportation, see exactly what can be done. So I don't want to provide some sort of number or figure toward this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Next is Abraham Salcedo. Can you unmute Abraham?
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the time. Actually, the previous speaker kind of asked my question, which was going to be around the cost. But then just so I understand, it sounds like this is to explore and find out what would be the best type of illumination, the best type of light. So there's not specificity as that we're requiring a certain time or type. It's to understand what might be appropriate and most effective for New York City itself, as well as the placement, et cetera. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's why it's hard to provide any of the estimates for cost, the types of lighting, et cetera. Okay, that provides a lot of context and helps fill in some of the understandable gaps. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Abraham. We have some speakers left, and we can get everybody who wants to speak, but I would hope that we can keep our remarks somewhat limited since we've gone a long time on this, and we have another item that I think will take some time too. So we'll go to Michelle.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, what caught after I had spoken and thought I sort of understood, what caught my ear was that those side lights that are on the ground flash on when an approaching car comes, which to me sounds very dangerous. I'm thinking of driving along, and all of a sudden the driver gets a bright light in his face. So if that's an integral part of all of this, that's of a lot of concern. If that's the way the driver is going to be made alert, I could see a driver as well as a pedestrian or anybody becoming alert because the area lights up with the overhead solar panel, assuming that works. But to have a bright light flash on the ground on either side of a crosswalk, that sounds very dangerous to me. A driver would be caught, could swerve, any number of things. If that's an integral part of it, that's very disturbing for me. Can you clarify, Brandon, or are you not quite sure about it?
So if I understand the logic, so the light is so bright that the driver would swerve. From our research, we don't see that. Again, these are intermediate lights. And so we don't see
I don't understand. What's an intermediate light?
It just flashes quickly.
You mean intermittent light?
Yeah. So from what we see across the country, we don't see drivers when these devices are used cause some sort of accident. Rather, it's the reverse. They avoid an accident to help pedestrians cross. Again, I think the most important thing here is that pedestrians would be assisted in health. And so there are a lot of cases of people running across the street and nearly getting hit, or there are cases of people who just cannot have the ability to run. You know, we've heard earlier that someone could be wearing dark clothing, and if you're wearing dark clothing at night and there's a car coming,
that's a big issue. But what's the difference between this flashing light and the flashing red or yellow or whatever light that exists on a hanging traffic light? That alerts a driver. I'm a driver, and I'm riding along, and if I see a flashing light of any kind, by the color, I know what my expectation is, what it expects me to do. But if you're putting it on the ground, that is focusing it right in front of the driver. And while I recognize that you're saying yes, and because of that, that driver is more alert to the fact that there is such a warning, but I can see a lot of danger to the driver with that happening. To me, it's much safer to have it where a driver is used to looking, which is a hanging red, green, yellow light, whatever, make that brighter, put in another signal if you want to on that, you know, maybe a more warning signal, but on the ground, popping up and flashing, that's of concern.
So I think, right, just to correct, it's not always on the ground as well. It can also be on a sign as well, signaling either one, the car has to be to a complete stop, whether that's a stop sign or a full stop sign, or it could also be on other signs as well. That's another alternative way to signal to the driver that a pedestrian is crossing. That's a layer for them to stop for the pedestrian themselves. Again, the legislation.
What is your expectation that this is going to go out of committee or whatever? What's your expectation of how this is going to move along at the council?
Yeah. So I can provide a detail of how the council works. So this has a supermajority, and so we expect it to be heard sometime early next year. The way it would work is it's heard before the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure. The administration would come, provide their perspective on the legislation. We currently don't know, given it's too early to tell. And then after the administration testifies and provides a question and answer period, with council members. Then comes the public portion of the testimony. Now people can show up, they can be virtual, they can even write in their own comments. And so they will provide their perspective on the bill or on the topic of question, because it may be an oversight hearing. But again, we're council members, not the chair of transportation and infrastructure. And then afterward, we would ask for a negotiation with the administration on the bill. And
so I'm just wondering if it would be more appropriate for this committee to comment at that time, where we have way more information and can really formulate a resolution on what makes sense to us. I mean, once again, you know, we would be approving a concept, which, you know, I'm always concerned about that. Even having said that the proviso would be in the resolution, but if this isn't even being taken up yet, what is our rush to comment on it when we don't have enough information? Shouldn't we wait and see how the council and the committee flushes it out and what tweaks they do to it, and have that be presented to us
just
more
to quickly
final form? No,
Michelle,
just to quickly go ahead, Sean.
Let me say, Brandon, I thought that's what you were going to talk about, and there is something to that, just from my perspective too, because this is unlikely to, you know, come up right at the beginning of the year, and so we do have some time, and we don't even know how the department is going to come out on this, and the administration will come out on this, and this is something that it seems from the discussion here that it would be useful for us to get more information, just exactly how it would work, and some more of the thing, you know, and look at some of the places where it's actually worked and see how it happened, and that would be more helpful to the committee as a whole before we make any final decisions. But that's so I think, I don't know how Craig feels, but I think, you know, that that's perfectly fine with me, frankly.
Yeah, I think based on the guidance that we're getting, that probably makes sense.
Yeah.
okay.
And Brandon, do you want to say anything further?
Yeah. So just to clarify something. So the bill would be heard. Changes to the bill would happen presumably after a hearing. They wouldn't happen before a hearing. It's very rare for a bill to be changed prior to a hearing. The intention is the bill changes because the public provides their comments, because the administration provides their comments. So that's why it's important to really be at those hearings, so you can share your perspective on the record.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think, Brandon, in general, this committee, that we've taken positions on, you know, on legislation, but we generally like to get as much information as we can, and to the extent there are questions which people feel are unanswered and that maybe we could get more information on, we try to err on that side. And I think we would still be timely in any initial reaction we would have to the proposal. So, so maybe we ought to, at this point, lay this over, and we can bring this up next year, essentially, when we have more information, and a few things have been raised here, and I think there are answers to those things, and even on the costs, there are answers, because, you know, you're talking about a solar panel and a battery, and so, you know, I would assume you could sort of figure out what you're talking about and how much a ballpark cost that would be, to give us a better sense of the whole thing here. So, so unless anyone wants to, you know, objects to that, why don't we lay this one over until next year, and we'll figure out after we've looked into it some more when we can bring it back. But we will bring it back, Brandon. So you could tell Julie that we're not turning our back on it here, but we're going to consider it, but we'll take it up in the new year, you know, reasonably soon in the new year.
Yeah. And just, I think the comments that you heard tonight hopefully can help inform the discussion and allow you to have a sense of what some of the questions that may come up may be, and hopefully put you in a stronger position to be able to be on a pathway to success with this, at least from my perspective.
Yes, I agree. Okay, why don't we go to item 3, which I think will have a number of comments on also. And this is discussion of expanded use of daylighting at intersections. The same same issue from a slightly different perspective. And Craig, I know you wanted to make some introductory remarks on this also.
Right. So again, I'll point to what I had said leading into the illuminated crosswalk discussion, just in terms of the broader perspective regarding pedestrian safety and intersection safety. And this is a discussion that's been held at numerous community boards in recent months. And I thought that as we were talking about pedestrian safety issues, it would be an opportune time for us to be able to learn about daylighting here. I do want to, I believe I wasn't able to attend, but I know that there were numerous members of our board that did participate in the Civitas discussions, the program regarding pedestrian safety, and I thought that daylighting was one of those topics that was brought up in there as well. So I, again, given the timeliness, thought that it would be a worthwhile discussion to have, and just to be able to bring in a speaker who has done a lot of work on this, and that is Colin Brown from Sam Schwartz Engineering. So if we could just unmute Colin, I know he was going to give a brief presentation just describing what daylighting is. And I do want to also preface this with the fact that also is framing this discussion, which is that when you learn about daylighting, and I know Colin will touch upon this, daylighting is something that is required all across New York State. It's except for in New York City. It's one of those state rules in which there is an exception for cities with more than 1 million residents. So this is not just some foreign concept. This is a widely accepted practice, and for various reasons, New York City is not following that state law because of the exception, and that is something that also may want to be considered as part of this discussion. So, Colin, if you're here, we could unmute you, and you can give your presentation.
Assume Collins, there he is.
Hey, thanks, Craig. Can someone just confirm you can hear me all right?
Yes, we hear you.
Great. Thank you for that intro, Craig, and appreciate the time from the committee and everyone here to present on this. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see this.
Colin, you want to identify yourself just for the...
Yes. Yeah. So thanks, Chuck. So my name is Colin Brown. I'm a transportation planner with Sam Schwartz Engineering. We're a transportation planning and engineering consulting firm here in New York City and across the country, but we do most of our work in New York City. So familiar with this topic, and just wanted to tonight provide a little bit of a baseline, kind of some education on the topic of daylighting, and walk everyone through some examples that we see across the city so that we can kind of correctly talk about this and identify it. So I'll go through that now. And I will go through this presentation fairly quickly just I want to respect everyone's time here tonight. But please, if there are any points that we have questions on or want to go back to, I'm happy to revisit those slides. But I think we should be able to move through this presentation in about 10 or 15 minutes and then kind of open it up for discussion. So first, I want to start with some background, some definitions, and how daylighting as a concept kind of fits into the toolkit of safe street design, and then run through just really quickly some visual examples of precedents, both in New York City and other cities, and then finally touch on a little bit of implementation about how this actually kind of gets in the ground in the city. So to start with, daylighting is any design intervention that is used at intersections and specifically at the crosswalk to increase visibility. And really what we're talking about here is increasing the visibility of pedestrians in those crosswalks. So this is really about bringing those pedestrians into a better viewpoint of the drivers that are coming down the road. And within, as Craig mentioned at the beginning, New York state law actually prohibits parking within 20 feet of crosswalks, but because of the exclusion for cities with over 1 million residents, New York City is exempt from that currently, and parking is only prohibited directly within crosswalks at present in New York City. I'll reference again some of the safety data that that was shown earlier for CB8, and just to really focus this conversation, I think it's been mentioned a few times tonight, but the reason that daylighting and intersections in particular are so important for pedestrian safety is because that is where we see over half of the crashes and the conflict areas within the city, and it kind of logically makes sense that this is where, you know, most of the activity is happening and most of the people are crossing. So that's really why this design intervention is focused on the intersections. And I should say that it can be applied to other contexts, but really for this conversation, I wanted to really focus in on intersections. At a broader level, this is a kind of best practice within planning that goes all the way up to US DOT at the federal level with their Vision Zero program. And something that is kind of affirmed at that level is the safe systems approach. So we always want to start from the standpoint that there's always going to be some error. There's always going to be mistakes that happen. There's always going to be kind of accidents that happen. So we want to minimize the harm that's caused by those as much as possible. And the key point in that is making redundant systems of safety. So multiple layers of safety. If there is, you know, a mistake that has happened, that happens at an intersection, we want to reduce the harm to any potential victims of that. So what we're looking at here on the right is kind of a typical condition in a city, and certainly New York City, where we have cars parked up to and even kind of overlapping on the crosswalk, which, you know, in this condition, these two cars here at the front are actually parked illegally. They're oftentimes blocking the pedestrian ramps. And so this is something that's an issue for not only ADA accessibility, but often anyone with a mobility issue, anyone with a stroller or any other kind of mobility device. But really what we want to focus in on is the visibility. So we can see the driver's range of vision here. And then with the daylighting concept, we'll look at some other variations later on in the presentation, but seen here is one example of what that could look like. And it expands the range of vision for that driver, but also increases the visibility of pedestrians waiting at the crosswalk to be able to see drivers approaching and make eye contact. So it's a bit of a two-way street there, so to speak, in terms of the visibility of the pedestrians, but also the drivers. So the next few slides are just a few examples we can see in the yellow area here of different daylighting options and some of the ADA accessibility benefits that come with the daylighting designs. So I'll move through these fairly quickly. This is at a typical kind of four-way intersection. And then at something that we would be more likely to see along an avenue, certainly in CB8, the yellow areas again are expanded pedestrian protection elements. So now I'll just go through. I wanted to provide just a little bit of visuals to help this. So in New York, there are many different examples of daylighting. They can be as minimal as a small bump out with a planter or some flex posts. Along avenues, we often see a little bit more substantial treatment, which would include physical elements and also elements in the road to slow turning vehicles. We know that a lot of these collisions happen when vehicles are making these left-hand turns into the crosswalk. There's often poor visibility there, so keeping this area clear of visual impediments is something that helps with that visibility. And I also wanted to touch on some of the different variation that can go in these areas. So some planters, bioswales, kind of stormwater management elements can often occupy these spaces, but the real key is to keep that visibility clear right at the crosswalk. And in this example, you can see a kind of temporary daylighting treatment on the left-hand side, and on the right there is none. And you can see it's a little bit difficult to see, which illustrates the point well. There's a person standing behind this car waiting to cross, but they are difficult to see as you're approaching that intersection in a vehicle. So that was New York. I did want to touch on a peer city that has seen some pretty widespread success in eliminating pedestrian fatalities on their streets through use of daylighting, and that is Hoboken. So I believe recently they just passed the mark for 6 years without a pedestrian fatality on their city streets, and they've been pretty aggressive in implementing a phased approach of daylighting at intersections. So here we can see an interim option of just flex posts and paint right at the crosswalk. And here a slightly different variation that wraps around to include both crosswalks here. And finally, this is a more built out permanent iteration. This bioswale here keeps this area immediately adjacent to the crosswalk clear of visual impairments. So it does, if anyone is waiting at that crosswalk, it makes them more visible to oncoming vehicles. So finally, I wanted to touch just the final 2 slides here on implementation. As we see it across New York City and other cities, often implemented in a phased approach. So this pilot kind of first initial phase where we have textured paint, flex posts, or planters is put out first, often to really test out the treatment at sidewalks and crosswalks. And this is a fairly low cost way to implement it and test out the efficacy. And then in a more permanent situation, we see the full build out of curb extensions. You can see it on both sides here, immediately adjacent to the crosswalk. It provides a shorter crossing, but also increased visibility of pedestrians waiting at those crosswalks. And this is, of course, a little bit more of a cost, but it's often paired with roadway repavings to kind of minimize the costs that are incurred there. So I went through that fairly quickly, but that is the end of kind of the initial presentation that I wanted to give, but I'm sure there are questions from the committee members, and I'd be happy to go back to any slides and answer any questions I can.
Colin, there's one thing that I think right in the beginning, you talked about the state law, and then there looked like there was something about a city law, and which you didn't mention, and I just wondered, about that.
Yeah, thank you for referencing that. So I did skip over this second point here. This was a New York City law that went into, I believe it was signed in 2022 and goes into effect in 2025. And that is requiring New York City DOT to implement daylighting at no less than 100 intersections per year. So again, starting in 2 years, that was approved at the city level.
There is a law in the city that will require this starting in 2025.
Correct. Yep.
In 100 intersections. Okay. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. Okay, let's see, about any people with questions. And I see besides committee members,
we have 2 people, members of the public, Leah and Liam.
Leah first. Yes. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. And could you identify your full name?
Leah.
Yeah, Leah Anlin. That
Right.
was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I was just wondering though, is your firm working for the city or for CB8, for DOT? Who is this presentation designed for?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I should have identified it at the beginning. We are not. This is just an educational presentation, hoping to provide some baseline information about it. So this is not connected to our work as a firm specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, I think we had, let's see, and then we had David Vassar, I believe, the next, if I'm looking at it correctly.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I really enjoyed this presentation. I think, I mean, my impression is that daylighting is just a win-win. I think it, just makes things clear through some solid infrastructure, what intersections will look like, and that pedestrians are getting priority here, and that itself sends a strong message. It sort of complements daylighting, to me in a way. I mean, I love daylighting, the idea of it. It's going to need testing, I think, but the idea of putting the spotlight on the pedestrian, the most vulnerable player out there, is really appealing. I walk and I bicycle everywhere in this town, and I just love the idea of it. And this one has a solid precedent. I mean, Hoboken is not New York City, but it is a vital urban setting. It works there. Probably after a year or so, even the most staunch opponent was pretty convinced that it's a good idea. I'm just imagining. So I'm absolutely for this great development. And let's move forward. I'm not a member of CB8, but I bicycle all over the place on the east side, and this looks fabulous. It'll save some lives, I'm absolutely sure. And I just wanted to point out that it's great to see these statistical tables showing the casualties on our streets of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. But until you've been to an event like the commemorative event I went to in Astoria, where victims of traffic violence gave testimonials and cried openly over family members and friends they had lost in traffic violence, really no statistic can stand up to that. They're just different things. Anyway, that's it. Great plan. Thanks, Colin Brown, for the presentation.
Thank you, David. Next is Dylan Geronimo Kennedy.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to speak in favor of daylighting. We talk a lot about pedestrian safety here, and obviously just on this call, I've been talking about it for a while, but it's such a huge priority. And this, I'm sure that some people on the board know me as a cyclist, but the truth of the matter is I walk maybe 10 times as much as I cycle. Everyone here is on the sidewalks, and this is such a great way of making it safer. I know plenty of other community boards are pushing for this too, and I would just ask that our community board push for maybe more than just 100 that are legally required, but to get at least the temporary solutions in lots of different places. And then it's only been mentioned a little, but this does force cars to not park in some areas. So I know there will be some concerns about parking spaces, but I wanted to add the context that in the mayor's plan, the number of parking spaces for placed in the city is really small. It's like less than 1%, something like a quarter. So this is a great way of improving safety where it matters most, at little cost, both in terms of parking spaces and when we do the temporary solution first and the bulb outs whenever they're paired with road work anyway. I think this is just a great approach for the city, and I'm really excited to see it as I walk down the street for the next however many years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oliver Brukoff.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of this. I agree with everyone else. Everything that improves pedestrian safety in a city where the vast majority of people don't have a car and walk everywhere every day is important. I'm happy to see that the presentation includes some of the lesser benefits. I push a wheelchair across our local streets here every day for my daughter, and access to crosswalks properly is a big change in that. Locally, I have a lot of problems when I go down to places like Union Square, where there's bulbouts. It's much easier. The crossings are easier to do. In some way, the traffic violence epidemic that we're seeing with bigger vehicles and all that makes this a inevitable must-have intervention now, where if I'm in a wheelchair, I'm lower down, I'm behind the car, I do not have my head above, I'm not visible. Right? If I have a dog running with me, that dog is not visible. If I have a child with me, that child is not visible. The 7-year-old boy that died a month ago in Queens was not visible because he was behind a car. And your pictures showed adults. Adults aren't even the biggest problem here. It's the most vulnerable road users who are completely invisible behind parked cars, let alone when they go into the crosswalks and not just up to them. So I'm happy to see that is included here. For me, it's a big concern and a big improvement that I want to see as soon as possible. Now, it will only be effective if it is hardened. So these temporary ones, we all know that's just an invitation to run over and park there anyway. Cars will park wherever they can physically get. So with the earlier discussion on where I would spend my money on New York intersections, I'd rather have a planter and a stronger streetlight than technology around it. Physically keeping cars out of the intersections and away from them will do much more difference to that. And my last comment would be on the law. It would cost New York City nothing to repeal that exception to the state law. Not anything. If there's consensus that this is the right thing to do, then the easiest step would be to repeal that law and make it illegal to park there, and then follow that up with physically preventing it. It's just someone has to take a stand there.
I think, Mr. Broekhoff, that unfortunately the state legislature would have to repeal the state law, but the city does have a law that says they're going to be starting to do this. So, and to the extent there's momentum for this, maybe that would go into the state legislature too. But thank you. Liam Jeffries, I believe, is next. Public member.
Yes. So first off, thank you. And also I'd like to personally thank Craig for his apology. The Hoboken example has been said here before, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I also will point out that there are very specific intersections in New York that actually do have daylighting like this in place. And actually the thing that I remembered during the course of this meeting is the fact that if you're ever in a theater district and like around 46th and 8th, there is in fact a good example of what a proper daylighted intersection, or at least partially daylighted intersection, looks like, and that's 46th and 8th Avenue. Because there is in fact a concrete build out at the crosswalk, and I can say this from personal experience, it is a significantly more comfortable intersection to go through, because you don't, if you want to see if there are any cars coming, you don't have to do what a lot of New Yorkers do and just sort of go behind the parked car and sort of peek their head out. So there are examples of this in action on our side of the Hudson that you can look at as well. This is not new to New York. It's been done. The only new thing here is that the city is finally appears to be taking this seriously enough to try and do this on a large scale, and it's very much overdue. We are in a pedestrian death crisis right now, and anything that can be done, especially something that, as a previous speaker said, wouldn't take a whole lot of resources to do, it should be a no-brainer. And that's all I have to say on this.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the board now. I didn't see any further members of the public. Alida Camp, I believe, is first up. Alida?
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for the presentation. So I guess I have a question or a point. So for the daylighting, it makes sense when it's on the side of the intersection from which the traffic is coming. But because there is a concern about the loss of parking spaces, does it make sense to do the same thing on the other side of the intersection that the traffic is going to? Because there, any pedestrian between the intersection and a car is between the intersection and a car and should be seen and is not being blocked by a car. So that may be a way of compromising, if there is such a thing, between people who are concerned about parking spaces and people who want safety. My other point is living in Manhattan and living near Lexington Avenue, that is now one lane because trucks always double park, whether or not there are cars in the parking spaces, that trucks are going to be there anyway, blocking the space at the intersection. They pay no heed to no parking, no standing, or anything else. And part of that, I believe, and I've mentioned this, is the stipulated fine program. So to me, this kind of thing, we need to recognize what is likely to happen with trucks, and for that matter, potentially non-city buses too, the private bus companies, and that would be a concern. And then once again, to call for pedestrian safety as a primary focus and ignore the dangers of bikes not following traffic laws is something that I think needs to just be called out. So I'm doing that. We need to look at enforcing traffic laws for everybody, and not because pedestrians and cars don't exist in a vacuum. There are bikes too, and pedestrians, and we've heard plenty of people over the course of years talk about how unsafe they feel in the streets because of bikes. Thank you.
If I could try to just answer those questions, I guess first to your point about bikes and such, no one's at least here at this point questioning other factors that impact pedestrian safety. I think what we are trying to do here, and what we try to do generally as a committee, is to try to deal with each topic on an individual basis. We would be here for hours and days if we try to come up with a comprehensive discussion on everything all at once. So the focus of tonight was meant to be about these two particular pedestrian safety strategies, and it's not to take away from other issues that exist. I just want to make sure that we're trying to just focus on what daylighting could possibly do, as opposed to other lack of enforcement or other policies that may also be contributing factors, which we can and have taken up at on this committee. In terms of your question regarding an intersection with one-way streets, I think technically you are correct in that if you are looking to focus on the part of the intersection that has the most critical need for pedestrian safety, it's certainly in the example that you see here on the screen right now, where the turning movements occur, and pedestrians aren't visible. So if we were to, I think you are correct, if we were to need to seek a compromise, we can definitely talk about the manner in which this would be potentially implemented to mitigate any potential concerns about loss of parking related to daylighting. I think the purpose of this discussion as well was, yes, there is this New York City law that is going to require 100 intersections per year, starting in 2025 to have daylighting, but that's still over a year away, and that's still 100 intersections across the city per year is really just a drop in the bucket. So I think the question that we have here is there an urgency to try to do something where we're calling for more immediate action and more wider scale action?
Yes, but in our neighborhood, other than the big crosstown streets, they're all one-way streets. So if we're going to call for it, then is it in the same way people raise the question about the spotlighting intersections, is it necessary to have it on the other side of intersections? That's all I'm raising.
No, that's a fair point. And I think intersection, I guess we would have to define an intersection. Intersection can, in this sense, can include all four corners of the intersection, because when we talk about the intersection of, say, 86th and 2nd, we're talking about the entirety of it. If we want to hone in on something where we're talking about the direction in which traffic is moving and specific sides of an intersection or corners of it, we can certainly do that if that's what we were to choose to do as a committee.
Well,
No,
let me,
I'm
let me
just
ask
raising it,
Colin-
that's all.
let me ask Colin to comment on that from his perspective. If you would.
Yeah, if I could jump in,
Second.
Alita, I wanted to thank you for the
Second.
question. I wanted to kind of clarify on that. I think it's a fair question about kind of both sides of the street. I think your original assumption was correct that really the most important, the most critical side of the street is the approach side. So this kind of near side where the vehicles are coming from. On the opposite side, maybe just one thing to consider is I think the other benefit that comes with this is a shortened crossing. So that can be done also, and I should say that all of these variations can be done in the immediate vicinity of the crosswalk. So there are variations where it doesn't impact kind of any of the existing parking. It's just at the crosswalk, but it does bring added visibility to that immediate section. So that might be a compromise that I think I would have to defer to DOT on that, but that might be a compromise.
And those kinds of things I think work well when there is a shortened crossing for pedestrians because there's some kind of bump or something of the curb, but that's a different issue, it seems, unless you have an umbrella for daylighting, which is not just not parking next to the intersection, but it includes everything that involves the intersection like that. And I don't have the terminology, but I appreciate your considering my question and raising other ways to deal about visibility when it's not the approach angle or direction or whatever you call it, the approachment of cars. But also, if you could just address my question about trucks, because they're just a huge problem everywhere. And the visibility is obviously going to be further minimized by the presence of large trucks blocking intersections. And we all know that they just don't comply with those rules that urge them to be at the curb. And I have my own theory about why, which I've mentioned, but if you could address that, I would be grateful. If you don't mind, Chuck and Craig.
Go ahead, Colin.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll at the outset, I should say I don't have any specific knowledge on, city policy that is coming down the pike related to that. But I know in terms of commercial loading zones and neighborhood loading zones, that's something that in general, the city is considering more and more to really prevent that parking. Now that certainly doesn't prevent double parking, which we of course see throughout the city. And as you say, presents a real issue with visibility, especially of pedestrians, of children, of those using mobility devices. So I don't know if this specific approach directly kind of intersects with that issue of trucks, but in general, as we see kind of larger vehicles close to the curb, this would be something that this would be a design approach that would help to keep them off of that crosswalk, and that I think would apply to trucks as well. In terms of the double parking, I'm not sure that I can fully speak to that issue. I think that might be a little bit larger, but I think it's a valid concern.
I think the city is trying to address that through some specialized parking areas for trucks, and as Alita was alluding to, the idea that it's not DOT, but it's the Department of Finance and special, arrangement.
Stipulated fine program.
With large people like UPS and all of those, FedEx and all of those things, and they can get 1,000 tickets and have to pay a very discounted rate. So it's a cost of doing business, essentially. And that is an issue. And I'm not sure that's an issue that the city will ever be able to solve. They're trying to solve it through the idea of these parking and loading areas, which I think hopefully will do some good. Let's go to Judy.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Let's go to Judy Schneider.
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of the second and the third issues. I think they both sound good. I have a question. I'm sorry I missed Colin's introduction. Colin, are you with the city of New York?
I am not. I'm with Sam Schwartz Engineering. We're a
Aha,
transportation
that's
planning.
the person. Then
Yes.
is Colleen still with us?
She is. I see her down here. Yes, Colleen is still with us.
Yeah, she
Okay.
is.
So, good. Colleen, I guess this question is addressed specifically to you and then to Colin and Chuck and Craig and anyone else who may know about it. I attended a program that Civitas did some weeks back, and Sam Schwartz was one of the guest speakers on it. And one of the presentations they made was a recessed crossing. In this scoring that we're looking at now, instead of the crossing being at the corner, it would have been 2.5 car lengths back for the people to cross. And it had been tried in other cities throughout the country and had been very successful. Has that been anything, Colleen, that you know about that your department has looked at?
So we have looked at recess crossing, and I think we do have some installed. And we also looked at enhanced crossing, which we do have some installed, on Riverside Boulevard and so forth. Yes.
And have
these are all in our toolkits, our safety toolkits.
And have they been in long enough for you to find out whether, because I thought that recess crossing was a really great idea. Have they been in long enough for you to gotten any statistics or data on whether we should be doing more of them?
We have been, monitoring them, and the data, shows that they are very effective.
So is that something maybe that we should be discussing at this program? And is it something we should be asked? Is that something we have to go to our electeds to ask them to look into? Or how do we get something like that done in our neighborhood?
These are requests that you can come before DOT and ask of particular locations that you have in mind that you would like us to look at.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Craig and Chuck, maybe that's something we can talk about offline and come
Colleen,
back.
is there a website that people can go and fill that out? I believe there is, right?
To fill out, no, there's no, there's not a website where you can go and enter that in with locations. We normally request resolutions from the community board on this.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I'll check with Sharon. I think they may have up on their website, they may have put up these presentations. I'll let Chuck and Greg let you know about it, because people might want to go into maybe not all of them, but certain of them. Some of the presentations they had were very interesting.
Thank you, Judy. Rita Popper, I believe, is next. Rita? And you, Rita.
Alan, thank you very much. This is a great presentation. My problem is that we are not Hoboken. And this is not 2nd Avenue that I'm looking at, or 3rd Avenue. I don't see any 18-wheeler trucks. I don't see any articulated buses. I don't see any. I'll give you an example. At 83rd Street right now and 2nd Avenue, there is high-rise construction on both sides of the street. And they have each taken lanes away. And so therefore, it comes down to one lane that's for buses, for everything. I can't tell you what a mess it is. I want this to work. I want to be able to cross safer. Those little flexible ballards really don't give me the security that I feel that a car is not going to jump or go over it. I just want realism, and we devote a lot of time to, if this was perfect, this would be wonderful. But we don't live in New York City. We have bike lanes, we have bike docks on the avenue. And I have to tell you, it's a thorough way. Let me tell you, I know when the Javits Center is having a home show, because half of those homes are coming down Second Avenue. I hope that you give, I'm just asking if you would give that some consideration as to making this New York as it exists now and how we can make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Paul Crickler is next, I believe. Paul? Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Chuck. Firstly, I want to thank Colin for taking time out of his evening late and doing this for us to help us understand all this. I do want to propose a resolution.
Okay. And if it's seconded, you can speak to it.
Great. It's a very straightforward resolution. We resolve that CB8 requests that DOT follow state law and install curb extensions or daylighting at all intersections, starting with intersections within a 1-block radius of any school, senior center, or facility for the disabled. There's a bunch of whereases, but that's the resolved bit.
Is there a second to that? Okay, I see some, I guess so, yes, I see seconds. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Do you want to talk to it a little bit?
I do. Thank you, Chuck. There are two things I want to talk about only today, just two things. For the first one, I've sent a picture to Will. Will, could you put the picture up on, maybe Colin, you could unshare your screen, please, first.
That was me saying hold please, but yes, you should be seeing it now.
So I want to make this as real as we can for people. This is what daylighting means. There's a gentleman earlier tonight who mentioned this. I don't know his name, I forget his name, but there was a young boy about 2 months ago called Kamari Hughes. He was 7 years old, walking with his mother, and he was killed right here where that red arrow is. And this photo was taken very soon after it, so the conditions are the same. This is what daylighting is all about. There was a young kid killed. This isn't some abstraction, and this happens all the time. And so the second thing, you can take the picture off now if you don't mind, Will, thank you. The second thing I want to mention is that Craig did a run through of the Craft Mapper data a couple of months ago. And at the time I mentioned there were 3 numbers that stuck with me that I would probably mention again, and here they are. Those numbers are 10, 41, and 5,500. And what they mean, this came from the data that Craig showed us, in the last 10 years in our community board district, 41 people have been killed on our streets and 5,500 people have been injured. And when we talk about injuries, a great many of those, the majority, have had life-altering injuries, losing limbs, broken bones, head injuries, brain injuries, very severe trauma. So this is not an academic exercise on what might work or might not work. Hoboken, yes, it's smaller than us. They've actually fulfilled Vision Zero. They've gone from multiple deaths every year to 0 for 6 straight years. And this has been a significant part of it. And I'll just repeat one thing that Colin had mentioned, about over half of all these injuries and deaths on our streets happen at intersections. So I'm making a direct appeal to my fellow community board members. This is the time to put aside other concerns that pale into insignificance compared to what we could do and join every other community board so far in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. There have been about 8 or 9 of them that have passed resolutions asking the city to do this. And I understand people worry about car parking spaces, but again, as somebody mentioned earlier today, I think the mayor has a plan for 1,000 intersections a year. that would take away less than 0.25% of the free parking available right now in the city. So I want you to remember that picture about Kamari Hughes where he was killed. And I'd like you to remember 10, 41, and 5500, because I'm going to mention those again in future when there's something about safety. That's the end of my pitch about this. I don't know if Brandon wants to mention anything, but Julie Menon has a bill as well, asking for a small number of these as well. There's wide support across the city from a whole number of different places to get this kind of thing done for daylighting. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Paul. Valerie Mason, I believe, is next.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, for the resolution. I think, I think this is something we have to try. It's a lot cheaper than maybe even solar crosswalks. And it's not that revolutionary, but there's two things I want to mention. Number one, as a person who looks for these semi-flexible protected crosswalks, never walk into one where you see the flexible poles actually bent over, because it tells you that the trucks are turning right in there and you will not be safe. So the time you will save crossing the street, you're actually putting your life in danger by standing in one of them. And I think that's something the Department of Transportation should actually do, like a walkthrough, if you will, of all of them in the city and see where they are, because it's a real thing. Also, those semi-protected, what would you call them, Colin? I want the right name for them.
You're referencing the flex posts, those kind of plastic.
The areas that you're showing for the
yeah, I think there's a few different names, kind of pedestrian priority areas.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. You walk in there with a false sense of security, because it's not respected by a lot, it's not respected by a lot of e-vehicles. And so you can find yourself in an unprotected area. But I want to talk about Paul's point, because this is very close to home for me. People need to keep their children on the inside when they're crossing the street. They have to know that their body should be, I hate to say it, the first body that's hit by the turning car. And I don't think enough people actually grasp that. And so I would love to see the Department of Transportation, in conjunction with a rollout of these pedestrian priority areas, just a public safety announcement for people with strollers, not to push the stroller out first. Keep your child on the inside. If it's a left turn, make sure that you're the first person that gets hit by the car that doesn't see you in the blind spot and your child is on the other side. I do keep track of those accidents, and a lot of them happen, that is the worst feeling in the world, to be a parent who loses their child. And there should be a lot more education for pedestrians about safe ways to walk in these crosswalks. So I think all of this is positive. The only other thing I'll say is, unfortunately, with a lot of the larger, as Alita was saying, you have this issue. A lot of the side streets are only one way. The issue with the corners of where I live, like 72nd Street and 2nd Avenue, and that's exactly where I got hit, right in front of my apartment building. The problem is that, a lot of these corners have hydrants, and we have large food trucks that are parking in the hydrants, and they are seriously even blocking the car's vision from turning. Now, I don't know what kind of, priority pedestrian thing you could put there, but we have this issue with very tall trucks that are double parking on corners that are also impeding other motorists' vision. And so it becomes, again, I hate to say it, a matter of enforcement. And anything that we roll out here is, there still has to be increased enforcement. There has to be a way for, you know, it's great to put these things down, but somebody has to be around looking at them. So I think we should also ask for that as well. And I just want to end by saying, I think Judy has an amazing idea about moving some of our crosswalks to different parts of the block, because just again, 72nd and 3rd, one of the most dangerous corners on the Upper East Side. The crash data is a little bit better since we put in the pedestrian priority areas, but I think that's a corner or street that could be a prime sort of maybe pilot program to move the crossing off the corner there. And thanks a lot. I'm in favor of Paul's resolution.
Thank you, Valerie. Lita Camp, next, I believe.
Thank you. I'm not sure that Paul would accept this, but I'd like to propose a friendly amendment that at least originally that the daylighting in the sense of the cars not parking near the intersection be on the side that the cars are approaching from, and that another device such as bump outs or whatever you want to call it, whatever they're supposed to be called, for the curb and the pedestrians be on the other side. And then just to back up what Valerie was saying, they moved the crosswalk in front of Saks Fifth Avenue to Rockefeller Center off the intersection, I think because of the congestion and the dangers from turning cars, and that could be really effective. And then she reminded me when my kids were really little, I would urge them, and I think this makes sense for everybody, that when possible to cross the street on the non-turning corner, so that if you're walking east on an even-bound street and you're crossing Lexington, to walk on the north side of the intersection, because cars are not going to be turning onto Lexington going north because it doesn't go north. And that seems like a safe way, which is instinctively recognizing that intersections are a huge problem. And that's it. Thank you.
Should I respond to that?
Yes, Paul, why don't you respond?
Firstly, I think it was Valerie you mentioned about what you call those flexible posts. I call them vertical paint. It means they're useless and they don't protect us at all. And then to Alita's point, I prefer Alita to leave the resolution as it is because I'm leaving it general. I prefer to leave it to DOT to work out how many spaces would need to go and where things would need to be done. And that's their job to do. And I don't want to try and dictate that to them in this resolution. So I'll leave that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Next, we have Sharon Pope Marshall. Sharon.
I'd like to call can you hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been having connection issues. I'd like to call a question on Paul's resolution.
Is there a second to that? I see. Okay, we seconded. Anyone object at this point? Okay. Laurie, are you calling the question or no? Yeah, you're okay. Okay. To the extent I see your shining face above the bridge, or interspersed with the bridge.
All right.
Okay. Are we?
Yeah.
So
Let me just call the roll.
Why don't we take a vote on this here? I think.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a vote? Why don't you call the roll?
Yeah. Let me just call the roll. It's myself, Chuck, Abraham, Alita, Judy, Juno, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Rita, Sharon, Stephanie, Valerie.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone not accounted for? All present and accounted for? Okay. If you're in support of this resolution, you don't have to do anything, but raise your hand if you're opposed or you want to abstain or have any other reason for not voting in the affirmative. Michelle?
Yes, I just want to clarify because I'm not sure I heard correctly, but I believe Paul's resolution said all intersections. And if that's correct, I'll abstain.
Is that right, Paul?
It did say all, starting with the ones near schools and senior centers. And
yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay, Michelle abstains. Is there any other one who wants to either vote in the negative, abstention, or has any other reason for not voting in the affirmative? If I don't see anyone.
I don't see anyone either, but
we'll give it once, twice, sold. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Great. That passes.
Good discussion. And I think the next item is update from the Department of Transportation. Colleen, we have Colleen, who's our representative here from the Department of Transportation. And do you have any updates you'd like to pass on to us at this point?
Sure. So just so you know, I mean, the agency has been working, to look at commercial parking in the neighborhoods in, various community boards. And I know we are working on a smart curb project. It's a pilot project, and we're working with the Columbus Avenue bid. And the goal of this is to better manage the usage of commercial vehicles to prevent double parking. We just initiated it. So I'm more than happy to share with the community board that presentation that we delivered to CB7. I mean, this is something that community board 8 can, review and determine, of course, what locations, we can look at in your CB district. And overall, what we're looking to do is just improve, the loading zone usage, as well as bike parking, and improve the public space for pedestrians as well as cyclists, and of course, keeping, the roadway safe for motorists. So just wanted to highlight that with the community board, the smart curbs pilot. And we're working very closely with a lot of businesses to make sure that this is successful. We're also working with, the neighborhoods in the community boards, to transform the streets to make sure that, the usage is safe. So I can share with you that presentation tomorrow, and I'll copy Chuck and Charles and Craig on it as well. The other thing is that we installed the vertical elements on 3rd Avenue from 59th to 96th Street. That happened, I think it's completed today, as a matter of fact. It started 2 days ago, so I'm happy to tell you that it looks really great. The other thing is that I'm happy with the daylighting. I know that has been a concern with the community boards and residents. It's something that we have been looking at, with all of the projects that we're doing with all of our safety improvement projects. We're looking at those intersections to see whether we can daylight them or not. And I'm hoping that, we'll use something more robust from our toolkit, as opposed to the flexible post, as what Valerie mentioned, because sometimes those things are very high maintenance and they constantly have to be, repaired and replaced as well. So that's it.
I think there maybe have some questions for you here.
Sure.
Michelle, do you have a question for Colleen? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I have 2 questions, actually. One, Colleen, and frankly, I don't know how we're ever going to get on top of this. The Amazon business model currently is to hire enormous rider trucks, the size that can move apartments, many, many rooms of an apartment. I don't know if you call them 20 feet or whatever, but they're tremendous. And their model is to pick any spot on a street and then take portable bollards and go to the back of the truck and then block off the street behind them, again, often with another 20 feet. I have pictures of this. And then have their flatbeds loaded up and use that point as a delivery hub on a public street, taking up a lane. And that is currently their distribution mechanism. I mean, that's their protocol. And when they're in front of my building, I take pictures and I say, you don't own this street and blah, blah, blah. And they threaten not to deliver packages to my building. But at any rate, that is such a disruption everywhere in the city. And the other day, yesterday, I guess, now that 3rd Avenue has been reformulated, they are on the other side of the bike and parking lane, So the only 2 lanes that are left on Third have the Amazon distribution. Third Avenue is a nightmare to drive up. The traffic was bumper to bumper. So I don't know how to address that. Everybody loves their Amazon deliveries. Nobody's willing to chance losing that service. But with all the empty storefronts, it just seems to me that they should be required to rent a space, have all the packages dropped off in the morning, and then if people want to walk around with flatbeds or whatever, then do it from those hubs. There's no amount of truck spaces that you're going to be able to provide that can accommodate this, because they take up a half a block.
Yeah, I know, like, there was discussion. I don't know who started the discussion, but I think there was discussion with Amazon to find out if they would have their these pick up and drop off hubs, but I don't know whatever happened with that. We our Office of Freight and Mobility is in communication with Amazon, and we've communicated this with them to let them know of the complaints that we've been getting about their drivers occupying and double parking on the street and using the sidewalk as their staging area for their packages. And they've assured us that they were going to talk to their drivers to let them know that this type of behavior is unacceptable. If this happens again, Michelle, if you can just send me an email with it, we're going to flag this to Amazon corporate office and let them know of the complaints that we're still getting. Okay.
Yes, I just want to reiterate, happy to, but it is up and down every avenue on a daily basis, because this is their distribution model. They don't have another model. This is how it's done. So if the packages are on the truck, this is how they distribute them. And if you're not seeing it anywhere else in the city, just come up to the Upper East Side, and I'm sure
Michelle,
it's everywhere else.
Yeah,
Um,
Michelle, we get complaints about it. We flag it for Amazon and flag it for DOT and flag it for the NYPD. They'll just move down the street 2
Exactly
blocks.
right. That's
And
right.
it's not just Amazon, it's Fresh Direct. It's
Well, the one that has the most enormous truck, though, is the Amazon truck, can move an apartment. Anyway, that's an issue. I know that all they do is move, because that's what they did when I scooted them away, and they went a couple of blocks down. That's one thing. The other thing, and I had forwarded you this picture, Colleen, before the meeting. Did you get the updated picture
I
of
just saw it, and I'll request an inspection of it.
Yeah, they doubled down. They were arrogant enough. If you all recall, it's the corner of 87th, the northwest corner of 87th and 2nd, where a restaurant built out not a sidewalk cafe, but built an actual extension of their building. And when they were caught and reprimanded by the DOT, they simply doubled down, and they have finished it. And there is an entry ramp, and they are open, and they are in business. And I don't know if I could flash that picture up, but the point is, it's a complete enclosed structure with a roof and a floor, and it's as though it's part of the building. And as I had said last time, I was just particularly disturbed by the arrogance that they were not feeling threatened by the DOT. That to me was the most disturbing.
Michelle, just so you know, we did inspect the site, and
I know you did.
Yeah, we also flagged.
Here it is. If you can see it, here's the site. It's all closed in. Yeah.
We flagged this to DOB, so I'm going to schedule a reinspection, and we'll pass it along to DOB, because DOB needs to get involved, because it's a attached structure to the building.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
I just want to call out the fact, in response to Michelle, in your comments regarding Amazon activities and warehousing, that next week at our full board meeting, we will be talking about some of the aspects of City of Yes. And proposal 14 under goal 3 of City of Yes is encourage safe and sustainable deliveries with micro distribution. And that includes a proposal to allow to create a new use for micro distribution facilities, so delivery activity can locate at small scale closer to homes and offices, and to use actual spaces within buildings. So that is something that we will be talking
Yeah,
about.
that's great to talk about, but I don't know the legality of forcing a business to rent a space, but that's for another day.
Well, you know,
No, it opens up a use group that didn't previously exist.
Right.
but listen, Michelle, Amazon, they're not afraid of the US government or any other government, basically. That's the problem.
Everybody needs them and wants them, or I
Right.
should say wants them and needs them.
Correct. Yes. Valerie, I believe, is next.
Hi, two items. Colleen, I just wanted to circle back. I think at the end of our last meeting, Craig and I were both asking about whether there was a report on how the redesign of Lexington Avenue was going.
Hey, so Valerie, we have to coordinate with MTA on that. I think I know I flagged this to my colleagues, so let me re-up this.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully, I'll get something to you guys shortly.
Okay, I mean, just at the end of last month, there was a report that all of New York City buses were running at their slowest speed since 2019, even after the implementation of these bus lanes. So I'd just be curious as to, what's going on there. And then the second thing is sort of related. Will, remember, we got that complaint from the building that the new green kitchen is in with the vestibule. I know you were sending it to DOB, but Colleen just mentioned that she had this other one, so maybe.
Yeah, Colleen, it's the new green kitchen. And I don't know if the person who sent us the picture ever filed a complaint, but it appears to be something between like one of the vestibules that the DOB does allow for during the winter for like take your coat off. Seasonal, thank you. And is full of chairs and tables.
Right. It's not just an entrance to the restaurant. It's essentially covering all of their outdoor
The entire
seating.
storefront. Yeah.
Okay. If you could send me that photo, Will, I'll have that.
Yeah, I'll forward it to you.
That's great. We really appreciate that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Next is Sharon, Pope Marshall, and then Sharon.
Thank you, Chuck. I happen to work near a neighborhood loading zone, and I'm always surprised when I find a truck parked there and actually loading and unloading. Because my office is on Lexington Avenue, and I see trucks double parked on Lexington Avenue all the time. The reason why I'm surprised to find a truck in the neighborhood loading zone is because usually it's empty. And I wanted to know, Colleen, is it possible to step up communications to these companies that have these trucks? I know that you have a communications plan in place already, but my sense is that at least the neighborhood loading zone that I'm most familiar with, it's severely underutilized. And so I was wondering if there's some way to redouble the communication efforts to these companies that they do have access to load and unload. For instance, if they're delivering a package, the truck that I saw just today was bringing in carpet into one of the buildings. So, for something like that, my sense is that not a lot of these companies know that they can do that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, our office, again, going back to our Office of Freight and Mobility, we work very closely with the trucking industry. And we also work very closely with UPS, FedEx to highlight, the loading zones that are in, the community board districts. And we've actually created neighborhood loading zones in quite a few of the community boards, which, you know, really has helped tremendously and has really reduced the double parking, because on a residential block, you might not have a location that has a neighborhood loading zone as opposed to, you know, 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. And again, we can revisit that again, and, you know, and let these companies know that, you know, there are neighborhood loading zones that, you know, they can use. There's also, like, I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, we have all of these on our website as well. We can share the link with them.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And by the way, I think DOT is doing a great job, and I love the concept of the neighborhood loading zone. So I'm very glad that they've, you know, that they're implemented, obviously, and that they've been so successful. And yeah, if certainly efforts could be redoubled, I think we'll have more of these companies utilizing these zones.
Yes, and I think we also have a website on our, and I'll share that with Will. I think we also have a link where you can enter locations that you would like to have us look at for neighborhood loading zones.
Good, thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Kevin. I think one of the things that we've talked about for a while, and maybe we ought to give Will mission impossible to get.
I don't choose to accept it.
Exactly. To get the representatives from companies like Amazon, Fresh Direct, the UPS, and others to come to the board to have a hearing and discuss with us what they're doing to try to deal with this situation. It might just, if you get the right people, maybe you might energize some of the people. So that's why I'm saying let's see if we can try to put that together for some time next year.
Right. Will, you've tried that before and have gotten no response, right?
I mean, generally speaking, yes. Fresh Direct is probably the nicest of all of them. They do actually respond and they do want to engage, but they also feel like they've worked very hard with the NYPD to have approved spaces for them to do their loading and unloading. Amazon is the hardest, and well, no, sorry. New York, the U.S. Postal Service is the hardest because if you notice, they don't even have license plates, so they can't be ticketed. Fun fact. Yeah, so they pretty much they pretty much park with impunity because there is no way to ticket the federal government.
We've all realized that, Will.
Yep. Well, I mean, and then yeah, Amazon's pretty whatever. But then if there's like other companies that you guys would like me to like try to reach out to, I'm very happy to try.
Well, you know what we'll do? We'll get one of our senators or members of Congress to get to the Postal Service and say they want them to appear. And we'll see if that works. We get the right person. So
it goes back to what you were talking about earlier about the discounted parking fine.
Sure.
Too.
Exactly. And then I don't know. We ought to get the Department of Finance actually to come up and talk about how that's. I mean, I'm sure they take the position that hey, this is business. People want all this stuff. We have to give them, ways to deliver and, just the conditions that are, but it'd be interesting to talk to them. So we'll explore some of this because this is a continuing problem and we can see if we can come up with some novel solutions. And we are occasionally able to get people's attention on things as we have. I think we took away the parking privileges at the 86th Street Fairway, and that got their attention very quickly and helped the situation there. But we'll work on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
David Vassar, I believe, is next. Can we unmute David?
Hi, thanks everyone. Yeah, I don't want to be a smart aleck CB9 interloper here, but I can't resist. I mean, just for perspective, right? I mean, our mail order economy, our all things delivered economy, is a lot of fun. It's great. It's convenient, but there are huge environmental costs to all that. And if you're a car owner here in America's mass transit capital, I am sorry, you're demanding public space, which is our streets, to store your car. You've really got to have some perspective here. The trucks are the drivers, the operators of those trucks, and their crew are working really hard to bring whatever it is that a lot of us are demanding, get there fast. They're going to deliver it, offload, and move on. But so many cars, so much space is taken up by private car owners who are basically storing their privately owned property on public space. So just for perspective, right? And the deliveristas, these guys are probably paid minimum wage. Their boss expects them to get their load there fast. The customer wants it fast. They've got to move fast. I'm a cyclist. I got to deal with these guys all the time in my protected bike lane. My protected bike lane looks a hell of a lot narrower now than it used to. But I don't begrudge these guys their space, even if they're coming the wrong way, because I realize they are basically surviving. So let's have a little sympathy and a little appreciation for the drivers, the deliverers, and if you can start a carpool network, God bless you. Do it. There's also drive share, and there's cycling. That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, David. I think that we haven't been too hard on these companies. We're just trying to see if they'll work with us to make things better. And I'm talking from the perspective of someone who doesn't own a car. Okay, the next is Paul Diamond, I believe.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone. First time participant, so bear with me.
Welcome,
if you will.
welcome. If you could bear with us.
Thanks so much. So I live at 1438 3rd Avenue, which is between 81st and 82nd. I'm on the board, so I'm representing the building tonight. We received a notice that they are relocating the city bike from 81st Street that runs west on 81st from 3rd Avenue towards Lexington to right in front of our building. And through a bunch of different outreach, we were told that this was the best forum to raise the issue. I may be out of order. I thought DOT might have been giving an update on the status of that. So I was first going to ask about the status and then see if we could discuss some alternatives.
Well, Colleen, I know we've had some correspondence back and forth on that, and Colleen, why don't you?
Yeah, we did have some correspondence back about this, and Will shared it with me. So we relocated the station as part of the 3rd Avenue Safety Improvement Project. And as you know, the agency DOT, we try our very best to balance the needs of all street users and to help address the need for the commercial parking on the side streets. The agency plans to relocate the station, which is going to happen. It was actually scheduled to happen today. The station, as you said, was located at East 81st Street and 3rd Avenue. So now we're going to move it to 3rd Avenue and East 82nd Street. And again, this relocation will provide cyclists with better access to the city's bike network. And the relocation was supposed to happen today. It probably got pushed back due to a conflict. Just so
okay,
you know.
So it sounds like it's a fait accompli. So let's not argue about parking and efficiency and all that sort of stuff. Is it possible to create an area like they do for manholes or whatever other access needs to be worked around, where we could have I don't know what the right length is, 20 feet of break in the bike station at the entrance to our building so that we can access the building easier during drop-off periods?
What you're asking us if we can create a blank in front of the entrance to your building. I'm not going to say no, we're not going to look at it, but once the station is installed, we can definitely explore it and monitor it and work with the building to do that.
I mean, the issue for us is since the restriping, we're already in a worse position than we were, because when people they pull up their car, they load up their car, then they come back, they unload their car. Like, that's a real thing. People are in and out pretty quickly. Now we've got to navigate cars that are parked in the way, which are on the other side of a full bike lane, which a number of people have mentioned and we found accurate and are petrified that come summer, there's going to be a bad accident. There's people in that bike lane going both ways, going way faster than they should be. And so instead of just like pulling up, maybe double parking for a minute and getting the stuff right in the building, now we've got to navigate that row of cars. Then we've got to navigate the active bike lane with people zooming through it. If we move the bike station and provide the access where at least we're only navigating the bikes, it's one less obstacle for us. And along those lines, maybe this is too much in one meeting, is there anything we can do for traffic calming of the bikes themselves? Speed bumps, bumpy pavement that just forces the ones that are on the electric bikes that are going 30 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, and then the scooters that are going 30 miles an hour to slow down.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, for us to put, you know, speed reducer strips in the bike paths, I don't know if cyclists would want that, to be honest with you. And it would be a bit disruptive.
Well, of course they don't.
Along the flow. And the other issue is that with this city bike station, the station is going to be there. I'm not going to give you the runaround. It is going to be there. But again, we can explore, you know, creating an open blank plate where the residents will have access to it. But again, we would monitor it once the station is installed.
Well, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. And who do we talk to about monitoring that? Is that you, Colleen?
That's yes, that's me. Yes.
And is there a way to get your contact info?
I will put my contact info in the chat, or I will do that in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. And we'll try to keep monitoring it from the board perspective so that we can see that this is followed up on. Okay. Michelle, did you have something else at this point? Michelle?
Yeah, it's late. I don't want to make this a big discussion, but since Fairway was mentioned, I do want to report this. They are now putting their the products that are unloaded, that come off the trucks, are in the truck parking space adjacent to the curb, and therefore their trucks are now in the lane of traffic on 86th Street. The street there is a god-awful mess.
Okay, we'll get in touch with them and talk to them.
I think we should bring them back just so that they're aware that we are watching. I mean, I don't think it's unusual when vigilance starts to taper off, but that doesn't mean that, you know, they should be getting a pass. They still should be maintaining the kind of service that they said they would in all of their promises to us. They're very community obliging about coming to the meetings. When we ask them, they do come, they do talk to us, they have made some improvements, but there's nobody out there monitoring the street. And the other thing that's in that truck parking are all of their delivery bikes. So the product and delivery bikes are in what's supposed to be their loading zone, and their trucks are in traffic. I mean, they were given such a courtesy with that 150-foot loading zone and almost, you know, like 18 hours a day. It just seems that they should have a little better internal control. They're just not vigilant enough.
Okay, we'll check into that, and we may get them back for a periodic check-in. Valerie, did you want say something?
Yeah, last quick comment about the movement of these city bike stations. When we first had these coming in, and this was even before Craig was co-chair with you, Chuck, I thought the DOT was going to come to us when they were pre-installation and pre-movement of these bike, corrals around. And I don't think that has happened on a regular basis.
So, Valerie, we wouldn't come to give a presentation. We would notify the community board, which is what we did do.
I think they may make a distinction between, and Colleen can talk about this. They may make a distinction between putting in new bike stations and just moving some around.
When we're installing if we are installing, I think if it's infill, if it's new infills we are doing, yes, we'll come. But a relocation, we wouldn't come to give a presentation. We would notify the community board via email.
Well, if we get enough notice, then we can ask you to come and talk about it. If we get enough notice, obviously.
But I mean, what's the time period? I mean, okay, I think like you're using the term relocation rather broadly, because I mean, you're actually getting rid of one station from a 3rd Avenue location and you're moving it to a side street. That I'm sorry, I'm not really agreeing that that's a relocation. That's like the one you had was, I mean, because under that theory of the case, the only new ones were at the very beginning when you first did the installation. You could characterize everything after that as a relocation.
I'll take it back. I'll let the folks in Bike Share know that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, I understand that you give the notification, but I think we should at least have the ability at these meetings for you to come and announce relocations and new stations so that, the public can have some input. I mean, you basically told this gentleman that, surprise, the thing could have been in front of your building today. You're just lucky it's not there. That seems kind of odd.
Well, Valerie, I have been in communication with the community board about it, and there was an individual representing the building that had contacted the community board about this. So
I know, but let me ask you a question. You're telling me that you didn't contact the building directly?
Liv contacts the building. Yes, there is communication with building management. Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard that from Mr. Diamond, but okay, well, if we can try to just get some kind of more notification of these quote unquote relocations.
Yeah,
I'll take this back and I'll discuss it with my colleagues. And I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Valerie, we'll follow up on this and see about getting a better procedure maybe.
Well, I know they're not happening that often anymore,
right,
so
right, but still, I agree. Rita? Popper?
There are no more questions. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I think before we do that, I just would like to see if there's any old or new business. We talked a lot about it here. I don't know if anybody wants to raise anything else, but I know there's some few hands up. But I think people who haven't talked, there's someone, I think one of the members of the public, Mickey, who, maybe, why don't we let him, if it's...
I think Mickey is who I was speaking to about this bike station.
Yeah.
Oh,
hi, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, no, I'm in the same building as Paul Diamond.
Okay, well,
and
going over there,
wanted to just clarify. So, yeah, so Lyft, was it? They reached out to our building to let us know about this relocation a few weeks ago. I then, been chasing, multiple avenues regarding this issue. So I've been in touch I haven't really gotten a response back at all from the DOT with any of my outreach. And I've reached out multiple times, but I have been speaking to Will, Bright Bill, and we've had some good constructive conversations. And, at the end of the day, obviously, the DOT is going to do what the DOT is going to do. And so we understand that the bike station is going to be moved in front of our building. But I will tell you, there is not probably a day or two that passes by where someone in our building comes pretty close to getting clipped, because, the bike lanes, unfortunately, are being utilized by literally motorcycles at, speeds that are faster than what the art vehicle traffic is, which is unfortunate, but it does serve. It's supposed to serve a good purpose. But the point about the bike station, though, is, I think rather than try to monitor the situation because we know what it is, you're now asking, residents in a 400 resident building to navigate through bike stations, through bicycles. So the passageway is even narrower, and then the oncoming bicycles really don't see folks coming through those bike stations.
Well,
and so just imagine the scenario. Yeah.
Let me just say, we discussed this, and Paul was, had a discussion, good discussion, I think, with Colleen, and what they made a commitment to come and look at this and see if there could be a space made in the bike station placement in the front of your building. So I think, I don't know.
Yeah, Chuck, my only caveat is to be more proactive about it rather than wait and see.
Well, they're not gonna, no, look, I can tell you, dealing with DOT, they're not gonna do anything more than they said here. They're gonna wait till they put it in. It could have gone in today. It just through some administrative thing, didn't. So I think, frankly, the best chance is to work cooperatively with them, and I think they'll try to do something for the building. But I don't think it's gonna. I don't know that they're gonna do that in the beginning. So that's.
I mean, we're here to cooperate, but you understand that
I don't want to prolong this discussion, frankly, because I think we've reached some kind of a position on this, and I think the best thing to do is to make sure that DOT follows up on its what Colleen said they would do here, so they can look at it and see about doing it. And I think they do try to be helpful in those kinds of things.
Sure, I'll rest my case here, but I don't think it's cooperation. I mean, it's being moved. I've reached out multiple times, haven't got any, comments back, and there hasn't been a discussion. So, I mean, you could call it cooperation, but I wouldn't suggest that it is.
Well, I understand, but it's when dealing. I think if something good can come out of this in the end, hopefully that'll give the building some relief. Not everything you want, but.
No, we're not asking for anything. We're asking for 10 feet in front of the building. That's
well, I know, but I think Colleen is basically saying there's a good opportunity to get that. Just okay, so I think.
Okay, as long as we leave the channel open for discussion, that we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Before I know Rita had her motion. I interrupted her. Rita, did you want to? Oh, she left. Okay, so let's go back to Stephanie Reckler. The last two, and then I think we're ready to adjourn. Stephanie, do you have something you wanted to
Yes, I'm Stephanie Reckler. I live on 78th Street in Park. I'm asking, as a member of the executive committee of the Committee to Protect Our Lenox Hill Neighborhood, there are so many vehicle and pedestrian traffic issues that I think deserve attention by the Transportation Committee. We have heard that Northwell is going to get certified at the end of the first quarter 2024. And they have been less than transparent in how they're going to deal with traffic problems on the proposed 434-foot tower on 77th Street and Lexington Avenue. And I ask you to call them in and ask them specifically what the plans are for not causing standstill traffic vehicle traffic on Lexington Avenue and the safety of pedestrians during the 11-year construction period.
Well, Stephanie, I know there's a task force that's looking at, or a special committee that's looking at that whole thing, and we'll talk to them and see what's come up and see what, if there's anything we can do, and we'll coordinate in the new year with our chair, Valerie. Okay. Next,
You have a hand up from Alita and then one from
well,
Sharon.
I want to, yeah, okay. I think we've sort of beaten enough dead horses here too. Go ahead, Alita.
Thanks. Really fast, Chuck. It's just a request to Colleen that as long as you're bringing back Valerie's
Colleen
request.
left.
Oh, then
Colleen
never mind.
left. Okay.
Never mind. Thank you.
Okay. Sharon? Go ahead. You're on.
Move to adjourn, please.
Okay, okay. Without objection, we are adjourned. We thank everyone, and all the best for the holidays and the new year. We'll see you at the board meeting, but then that's it. Oh, we're supposed to have a little board party, and
Yeah, and
undisclosed location.
but let's also just alert everyone that next month transportation will not be the first Wednesday of the month. It'll be
right.
the
We're
second
going to
Wednesday.
be the second Wednesday of the month because they're not going to. The schedule's been moved up a little bit, and the land use meeting is going to be on the 17th, and the full board meeting is on the 24th. So we'll be on the 10th. So we'll see everyone at the committee on January 10th. And
But if anyone wants to talk congestion pricing, we're having a meeting on the 3rd.
And I want to personally thank Craig for all the work that he's done, like today and these things, and through the year, to come up with all kinds of things. And even though he hasn't solved the issues in Westchester, he's helped us solve a lot of the issues. And I won't keep coming back.
We have the best of Craig here.
We do, exactly, Sharon.
You're sharing me.
But Craig's we have a great asset, and he's a great resource. We all appreciate it. So thanks, everyone, and we are adjourned.
Happy holidays, everyone.
We also have a great asset in you, Chuck, but
yes.
He's already gone. He left.